Yo, what's up, guys? I just got back. What did I miss? Anything happen? Did anything happen? What happened? What is everyone talking about? I was using the bathroom the whole time. I was doing nothing. I didn't do shit. I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't do a damn thing. All right, so I'm gonna be real with you guys, right? This Saturday we're gonna be debating. Me and Jackson. We're gonna be debating Adam Soything, and some guy named Steve Bonnell. I don't know, some guy that was a stand-in for Vosh, because Vosh was too afraid to debate, so they got the backup, and it's But Adam something, he's good for him. He's finally agreeing to debate. That's a little brave, right? He's at least agreeing to it. And yeah, so we're gonna be debating them this Saturday. And you know what that means, guys? It means that the weekly day off that I take usually is not gonna be Saturday. Instead, it's going to be Friday, which is tomorrow. So tomorrow there is not going to be a stream. And there's not going to be a stream tomorrow because I think I need a day off. I need a day off to go to the post office to get my fucking passport. I need a day off to prepare a little bit for the stream, which I am going to do. Prepare for the debate a little bit, which I am going to do. I've been researching some stuff, and I want to prepare. I want to prepare this time. I want to like cite stuff and whatever, because usually I wouldn't prepare, but since Adam's something, he's got like 1 million subs. I'm like, fuck, should probably prepare, because that's a guy who like he's always citing specific statistics and factoids and shit. So I'm gonna get my factoids in order and do that kind of stuff, right? Now beyond that, I am also and additionally going to be working on my writings as well, right? And believe it or not, guys, whenever I don't stream and I'm not visiting my family, it is really sad. It's just like kind of a hole in my heart. I'm like, damn, I should be streaming right now. I feel like I'm missing something, right? So I don't like having to skip days streaming, right? I could just be like Vosh and like do my research stream publicly as a public stream, but that's cringe as fuck, isn't it? Isn't that cringy as fuck? Right? Oh, you're gonna do a research stream today. No, we're not doing that, okay?
Based.
Thank you, Noxed.
Us playing with his hair like a Chad.
Yeah. No. Honestly, yeah. I cannot do research on stream. I have a very strict separation, and this is what separates me from the rest of the debate bros like Destiny and Wash. The input and the output is totally separate for me. Like, for example, when I'm offline, I'm literally outside reading books about Sufi mysticism and shit. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing on stream, right? So I keep a very strict separation between like the input that goes into my knowledge and my understanding of the world and the output. And also my research is super heterodox. Like, for example, I did research today, but like 2/3 of it was studying the Czech-Slovak economy after World War II. And you're going to ask, how is that relevant to a debate about Ukraine? I don't want to explain myself to dumb people. You know, it's like you don't understand how my brain works. You just don't, okay? So, okay, if you want me to answer that question, like for real, it's because of shit like I'm trying to get a better understanding of the post-Soviet and post-socialist transition. And that is going to give me a very clearer picture about what's... I already did a kind of breakdown and analysis. If you want to check the video out, it's called A Marxist Analysis of the War in Ukraine, which is basically about how, you know, the word democracy and liberal democracy is basically a code word for oligarchical looting, right? Because it's like, this is something like very early on. When we first started doing infrared shit, super early on, we like made this argument, or I made this argument. I was like, okay, so let's say Russia becomes a liberal democracy just like the West, right? Okay, then the government's going to be looted by oligarchs. It's not going to be democratic at all, because the people who are going to win the elections are just going to be the people who have fucking money to astroturf and spread their shit. You know, he who controls the media controls the fucking government. Shit like that. You're going to have situations like in Ukraine where they appointed literal oligarchs as the governors of these regions, right? And in Ukraine, that's a very oligarchical controlled state right now. They run rampant and free, right? So, and then you're like, okay, we'll just break the power of the oligarchs and do like a antitrust thing where, you know, you make the economy... Well, guess what that requires? That requires a level of authoritarianism that is beyond what liberal democracy is capable of. So that's why Putin is an authoritarian. In order to curb the power of the oligarchs, you have to go beyond the mechanisms of the formal liberal state, because according to liberalism, property is sacred and you can't touch property. Well, when all these people like own all of this fucking shit. You know what I mean? So it's that simple. Putin is a democratic leader. He's a normal democratic leader for Russian conditions. So yeah, it's just shit like that, right? But yeah, that's gonna be happening this Saturday. Now, in the meantime, I wanted to do today's stream. It's like Blue's Clues. Every single day is a new theme, right? No, I know this is not particularly an effective way to grow the channel, because I understand how it works on YouTube is that people want continuity. Even on Twitch is the same thing. I'm kind of flip-flopping between all these different crazy topics, but I think it's pretty similar. We're going to talk about fascism today, right? And we're specifically going to be talking about fascism live in a Twitter space, right? And actually, let's just get that Twitter space going. Start now. Okay, we're going to start this Twitter space. Yeah, we're just going to get it going now, just for the sake of it, you know. We're going to start this Twitter space right now.
Did you get my chat about checking Twitter DM?
Malhab, I checked the DM, and it said something like, it said some shit like, it was a picture of the stream starting at 2 a.m. Well, that's because you live in a different time zone. Literally it. It's because you live in a different time zone, right? But to give some context, I made a tweet. That's all this shit is about, tweets, right? That's how I commune and interact with the dumb fucks. See, on Twitch, there was something called Twitch Politics, so I could just react to shit within Twitch Politics. Now I gotta use Twitter to have a community to react to, right? A quote-unquote community. But anyway, I did make a tweet in August of 2021 where I basically said, a lot of people think that fascism means the density of tradition and this wrath of the primordial father, and it's like all of these like archaic and ancient things coming to the surface. And I said, no, fascism is this perverse, psychotic, ultra-modern phenomenon whose linchpin is war, and whose like psychological and you know, whatever characteristics are indistinguishable from leftists, right? So today, I actually think I wanted to do a Twitter space, and I'm gonna do a stream today, because oftentimes leftists are calling us and Pat Socks fascists.
Oz come to Brazil.
And listen.
Based.
I live in Massachusetts. It's not 2 a.m. here.
Dude, then I don't know what's wrong with it. Thank you for the 10, Imperator. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, anyway, we are continually being called fascists. So-called Pat Socks are continually being called fascists. Everyone is being called a fascist who somehow like deviates from leftism in any kind of way. So what I'm curious about is, where are leftists getting this
chanting? A Kojima Productions featurette.
Thank you, Janar, so much. Is this guy named Margot? Did we talk to this guy before? Did we talk to him before? Anyway, they're calling everyone fascist. They're calling us fascist. They're calling Pat Socks fascist. They're also calling us reactionaries, right? And what I want to use today's stream as an opportunity to do is basically question, hey, leftists, have you ever thought critically about what it means to be progressive or reactionary? Like, why do you assume that just because something has been given institutional backing, that it represents some inevitable form of progress that we have to accept? What if the institutions are somehow reactionary? What if these progressive tendencies and new things that they're trying to push on people are in fact reactionary responses to something else? So I want to question this kind of like prejudice. So Margot, I don't remember this guy. What's going on? Hello. Yeah, you're on.
Hey.
Okay, you're on.
Nothing. What are we on about?
First of all, where do you stand ideologically? You're a leftist?
I'm a communist.
So you're one of us?
I don't think I'm one of you. I wouldn't join the CPUSA, for example, but I'm a communist.
What do you think about the so-called Patsock thing?
So I think when people call you fascist, they aren't really making a comment about the content of your beliefs. They're saying that the rhetoric you use, especially when it comes to, trans people and the kind of, masculine front that
Do
you
you
put
agree
up.
with that?
Pardon?
Do you agree that the rhetoric can be called fascist?
Do I agree that you use rhetoric that is eerily similar to people who would nominally be to the right of you? Yes, that's how I would phrase it.
Well, that's a little ambiguous. We're talking about fascism here, right? So let's be more specific. Do you think that
Yeah,
rhetoric?
I think you say. Yeah, no, I'll be very clear about it. I think you say things fascists say.
Okay, you think I say things that fascists say. Well, I have a question for you then. Okay, so you say you're a communist. Are you a Marxist-Leninist?
I like Marx. I like Lenin. I don't think that label is particularly useful.
Are you a fan of Dimitrov and his work, The Fascist Offensive, and the Task of the Communist International and the Struggle of the Working Class Against Fascism?
I'm not familiar with it. You'd have to enlighten me.
Well, according to Dimitrov, there's basically four ways he defined fascism, just to simplify it, right? It's the most ferocious attack by capital on the mass of the working people. It is
That's
the
true.
unbridled chauvinism and predatory war. It is the rabid reaction and counter-revolution, and it's the most vicious enemy of the working class and all working people. And earlier, it was defined by the Executive Committee of the Communist International as the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary and most chauvinistic and most imperialist elements of finance capital. So this is how communists have historically defined fascism, right? Now, you're telling me that I'm somehow using fascist rhetoric because I said something about, I don't know, I don't even remember, trans people, or I'm masculine. I'm just trying to understand what the connection between those and fascism is.
Anyone who doesn't know about Dimitrov
Sure.
says anything
So
about
we
fascism
last
is a
talked
fool.
when you were going. You had this theory about the aesthetics of ContraPoints videos being a sort of will as representation Nietzschean psyop to make people anti-communist. And so, the thing in particular about the rhetoric that you use that resembles the rhetoric that fascists use is you say, there's an attack on traditional gender roles by the, I guess you would call them liberal intelligentsia. And this attack is making our movement, your movement, the things that you would want, to move toward communism. This feminization is making us unable to achieve our political goals, and that's something that a fascist might say, almost
So,
verbatim.
what
in
is
fact.
the first of all? Would you consider Stalin a fascist or the USSR to be a fascist state?
No, I think if you're operating on that kind of level of the use of the word fascism, it's become useless.
Because the USSR and the post-war period specifically made a distinction that they wanted to preserve traditional gender roles in contradistinction to liberal.
Yeah, I don't give a shit what Russia
values.
did in the 50s, particularly, because we're talking about right now.
Okay, sure. So in the context of the 50s, that was not fascist.
I mean, this is a really parallel question to the thing that I'm talking about, which is the type of rhetoric that you use, because this is a historical question about a particular regime, rather than something about you, a streamer, and the types of pencil neck nergans that you speak to and get to do your bidding, right?
So let's not talk about the USSR then, because you don't want to talk about it. What about that rhetoric is fascist?
What about the thing that is fascist about it is that fascists would use it, right?
Okay,
that it is
even
the
if
type
it was
of thing
true,
that fascists say.
Well, I would argue that self-proclaimed fascists are just as likely to be femboys and furries on Discord.
That's a thing that you would only say if you lived on the fucking internet.
I think they're just as likely to be those type of people.
You don't actually know any fascists.
I have definitely been shown evidence that there are plenty of self-proclaimed fascists.
Evidence on the fucking internet. People who post. People who make their entire personalities a function of the internet.
Okay, sure, I guess. Those are just people on the internet. So what people offline who are in a uniquely fascist way are saying the same things that I am? Because the Communist Party of the Russian Federation says things that's similar to what I say. They reject LGBT, the whole movement as a whole. I'm not even that extreme, right? And so you have communists worldwide on an international level who are saying things similar that I am. Now you're saying that some supposed offline fascists are using the same rhetoric as I am, and they're saying the same things that I am. I'm just curious to know what about that rhetoric is inherently fascist.
Sure. The inherently fascist part of it, right, is that there is an internal enemy with, supposed institutional backing that is corrupting the social fabric to make it impossible to achieve socially progressive goals. By socially progressive, I mean, communist ones. That's the thing that you would say. Whereas the fascist would say it's preventing us from achieving, the goals of a stable family unit and, a national pride, whatever else.
Okay, so
but then again, you do the national pride thing too.
Leftists,
You're a patriotic socialist.
So you're basically saying that all communists in history were fascists then? Is that what you're saying?
No, and I don't know why you would take from what I said that's what
communists have always posited an internal enemy that is responsible for a form of social degeneration, particularly the social degeneration corresponding with capitalism, that is preventing communist quote-unquote progress. So that's been universal among every major communist party in the history of the world.
Yes, but communists also see that there is a progressive force behind capital, right? That you need these
I agree,
this accumulation. Yeah. But you don't think that there's any good side to the LGBT thing. You just think that this is a perversion and a subversion of traditional culture, which is what a fascist would say.
Okay, hold your horses, sir. So communists believe that the progressive aspects of capitalism are two things, right? The first thing is formal equality with regard to the state, which basically means breaking down feudal, et cetera, relations, and basically establishing, some kind of constitutional order with civil liberties, yada yada. The reason that's progressive is because it eliminates these kind of economic privileges that correspond with state power. It's an anti-monopoly stance, right? The other thing progressive about capitalism, and the most important thing, is the unleashing of the forces of production. Okay, so two things that communists consider progressive. You're talking about like the LGBT movement. What is inherently, from the communist perspective, progressive about the LGBT movement? Now, I'm not anti-LGBT, but I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, because I could easily make the argument that this movement corresponds to a profound stagnation of the forces of production rather than any unleashing of the forces of production. It also corresponds, in a sense, to a curtailment of the formal bourgeois democracy, because it corresponds to the addition of all these like extra democratic and extra legal mechanisms by which sexual minorities are pursuing their agenda. So I'm curious to know, what about the LGBT movement from a communist perspective is inherently progressive?
Sure. The critique you've made in the past is that, LGBT is a form of liberal individualism, that it's this worship of the self that is socially preventative, whatever the word would be. Fuck it. The thing that's inherently progressive about, increases in LGBT rights is that, people of this kind have always existed. You get really mad about the 72 genders thing. That is a psyop. That's like an actual psyop. In like a very direct and real sense.
Are psyop?
Yes, I'm saying that this is a thing that whether it's a product of CIA involvement or just academics moving in circles that agents and assets move in. I think it's a non-productive diversion. I just also think it's a much smaller sliver of the full community than you make it out to be, and so it's a much smaller fucking problem. And so it doesn't actually mean that the LGBT movement is sapping the power of the movement for communism or whatever. I think you're just getting really mad about 13-year-olds on Tumblr and how there's a constant, ever-increasing supply of 13-year-olds on Tumblr. People are always aging into and out of liking that kind of rhetoric, right? The I can be
Okay.
cloud gender or
Well,
whatever.
just to be
It's a
clear,
thing that people broadly grow out of, right? And so
well,
it doesn't actually affect your political horizons
okay,
as a
so
streamer.
okay, well, firstly, so I have to respond to all the arguments made, right? So the first argument that I heard was
You
something
won't,
about,
but we'll just have a conversation.
yeah, well, the first thing you said sounds like that, well, it's progressive because these people have always been around. Now, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here because I just find that a poor argument to be. I mean, pedophiles have always been around as well. That doesn't mean they're progressive, right?
Sure, but why
So,
draw that equivocation? Because one is a type of personal freedom that
yeah, but there's
doesn't
nothing
really curtail
about
yours,
there's
and the other
nothing
is just
about people
directed
having
use of
always
children.
been around that makes it inherently progressive. Okay, that's what I'm trying to ask.
What makes it inherently progressive is that people are more free, right? And whether that's free to be themselves or free to express themselves collectively, that's still progressive, right? That's still the historical occurrence of freedom. It's fucking Hegel, right? There's what's more Hegelian than being
I think
non-binary?
that's a very non-Hegelian conception of freedom because the Hegelian conception of freedom is an identity of freedom with necessity, whereas the notion of freedom that you're talking about is a freedom of the ability to make arbitrary choices. Sounds.
I think you're saying it's arbitrary. I don't think you've shown that in any way.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to say there's nothing inherently about the fact that people have always existed that makes something progressive. Now, second of all, I hope you know that many people would characterize the rhetoric you just made about neopronouns to be fascist rhetoric. As a matter of fact, many people have justified the accusation that I'm a fascist because I've rejected neopronouns. So I'm curious to see
Yeah,
how.
sure, but you're an asshole about it. I was just like,
All right, is there
I mean,
anything
a very,
inherently fascist about being an asshole?
is there something inherently fascist about being an asshole? Was that your question?
Yeah, because you said, well, we're the same, but you're an asshole about it. So it's justified for them to call you a fascist. So I'm wondering, does just being an asshole make the difference that it's okay to call me a fascist?
Well, I think when you're, I might not say personally that you are inciting hate, but I think plenty of people would say that you incite hate towards LGBT people. And yes, that would be the difference between me and you.
Okay. So we have two things. It's like this is branching now, right? The first thing is that I'm inciting hate toward LGBT people. I'd love to see how that can be. On what basis do you say that? The second thing is that that is inherently fascist. So we're talking about what fascism is and what reaction is, right? So I want to be clear about why you're making this association between someone who hypothetically rejects LGBT as a movement and fascism or some kind of reactionism. I also want to know where you're getting the idea that I'm promoting hate against LGBT people.
Again, it's a distinction between logic and rhetoric that you're not really allowed to make because you're a debate streamer. You see, logic is when an argument follows basically from premises, and then the combination of those premises allows you to make a new conclusion, right? Whereas rhetoric is just the framing that you put around that logic, and the rhetoric that you use and some of the logical backing that you give to that rhetoric is the same content and form that a fascist would use in making arguments to bring listeners closer to fascism.
So even hypothetically speaking, if that was true, if people who self-identified as fascists, both in content and form, make the same arguments that I do, that doesn't actually tell us anything about whether it's inherently fascist, because I think the sky is blue, and fascists also think the sky is blue, but it's not only fascists who think that, now is it? It's also many other types of people, including communists internationally, who have that supposed rhetoric. And I also want to know what that rhetoric is exactly. Can you give us some specifics?
Well, I gave some specifics earlier when I talked about how the reason we're even talking about the LGBT thing, right, is because very, very often you use you talk about neopronouns like you're a fucking the amazing atheist or something.
Okay. I think they're
yeah.
fucking stupid.
Yeah, you're allowed to think they're stupid, but you also don't have to way, way, way over exaggerate the number of people who care about neopronouns.
Okay.
I think if you,
I think there are tens of thousands of people who are very active on Twitter, at the very least.
Do you even hear yourself? Tens of thousands of people on Twitter? Holy shit! We'll never get the working class on our side now. We'll never stage that revolution. What are we going to do?
Say they are disproportionately overrepresented among self
on Twitter.
No,
On Twitter, they
hold
are.
on. I think you're getting too excited, and I need you to stop getting your panties in a bunch and sit down and calm down and take a few deep breaths. They are overrepresented among self-identified communists, okay? And I am also a communist. So I find myself being called a fascist because I reject that kind of nonsense. And you're saying, well, I reject it as well, but you're mean about it, and that's why it's justified for them to call you a fascist. So again, I'm going to ask you, what about being mean? And what about my rhetoric is inherently fascist?
Well, it's not just the meanness, right? It's the position of LGBT people as an internal enemy, as
Okay.
a poison or decadence that has to be extirpated if the communist movement is to be successful.
That is the
That is the
that is
fascist
like ad
rhetoric part of
verbatim
it.
Soviet rhetoric, and at all
Yeah, I don't
stages
care that
of the
it's
Soviet Union's
verbatim Soviet
existence.
rhetoric because I don't live in Soviet Russia.
Okay, that is ad verbatim communist rhetoric at almost every stage of communist movements worldwide in history.
Okay, you made that up. Like, do you have a
So
an Excel spreadsheet of the positions on LGBT people
well,
by
you're
all
talking
of the
about
communist
I could
regimes
give you
throughout
stuff.
history?
I could definitely give you stuff about the LGBT, but I'm talking about you're saying this abstraction of setting up an internal enemy who is like spreading degradation and decadence and thwarting the communist movement. I mean, that is very much present at every stage of every communist movement in the history of the world. Now, whether LGBT people are being identified that way is a different story. But actually, it is true that communists historically, for the most part, have rejected any LGBT movement and did consider it a form of bourgeois decadence. I mean, it's in the history books.
Right. The fact that you're even like focusing on that and
I'm
using
not. You are.
the
You're
past
focusing
positions
on it.
of well, no, because I haven't talked about. You are the only person who's brought up Soviet Russia's position on LGBT people
And the
as
international
support
communist
for your
movement.
own position.
And the
Right.
international communist
You are
movement.
using an appeal to the USSR as a reason to be anti-LGBT.
No, I'm using this appeal to point out how there's nothing inherently fascist about that view, unless you want to characterize the USSR as fascist.
Yeah, maybe my abstraction is giving you trouble because
All right, I just want to know why it's
you're
fascist.
yeah, sure. I don't want to accuse you of like intentionally missing my point to look better to your viewers or
I am
something.
literally I'm here open to whatever argument you have about why it's fascist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're both engaging in good faith and so on.
I explained to people why I think ContraPoints is fascist. So I just want you and you don't have to do it in as a complex a way that I did, but just tell us why it's fascist.
Okay. So this internal enemy thing that seems to be tripping you up, right?
Hold on.
When you use
before you,
sorry.
you're gonna have to explain why the internal enemy thing is inherently fascist as well, because
Well, right, because fascism is this turning inward of capital when the colonies are no longer producing enough to keep the local social structure cohesive,
sorry, but
right?
I'm not sure where you're getting that from. I've read Dimitrov's work, The Fascist Offensive and the Communist International.
Yeah, we can operate from
But
more than one
I'm
definition.
just trying to say,
Who, like have a knowledge of
hold
the
on,
topic that we're
sir,
speaking about.
hold on. I'm just trying to say he uses the exact opposite argument. According to Dimitrov, fascism is an externalization of the class struggle, where they go out and invade other countries, and capital needs to go out and plunder other colonies and plunder other countries to displace the internal social antagonism. So I have no idea where you're getting this idea that fascism is this turning inward, when the orthodoxy that has prevailed among Marxist-Leninists has been the exact opposite. Fascism is not a turning inward, it's turning outward.
It's strange that you're using this one source as evidence of orthodoxy, because
Okay, what sources do you have?
I'm not like I didn't come here prepared to like dunk on you with books.
You
but
don't
like,
have to get you don't
it's
have
a
to give me
very
a book.
no. I know.
Can you give me an
I'm
author?
like I'm about to say the thing that is like from a source. There's the very common expression that fascism is what do they say? The return of colonial policy to the metropole, whatever it is.
Where'd you read that?
The tactics that are used to subjugate people in the periphery, once the periphery is either looted to the extent. I mean, you're right that there's
Yeah.
externalizing factors of fascism
Right.
as well.
So
It's just that it goes two ways, right?
yeah, well, I
The
just have to
the
say,
colonial
sir,
colonial
yeah,
tactics of policing and subjugation can be brought back to the center of society,
well, if
and
that's
also a society that is bringing those tactics back
okay,
to the
sure,
center can then decide that, okay, we have to go out and conquer more because the
okay.
old colonies aren't producing as much as they
I've
used
heard
to.
your point. I've heard your point.
Sure.
So the problem, Margot, is that I don't know where you read that from, but whoever wrote that is a dumb fuck because
Right.
both,
The fact that they
hold
don't
on,
agree
hold
with
on, hold
Dimitrov
on. You're
doesn't
gonna have
mean
to let
they're
me
a dumb
finish
fuck.
because I didn't interrupt you. I let you finish your point. All instances of real fascism we can find. I mean, even Portugal, right? As ambiguous as that was, you do have an aggressive extension of the colonial policy, even when there was not really any before. I mean, in the case of Italy, you had it in regards to Ethiopia and Libya. And then in Germany, I don't know why you're saying it's bringing it to the metropole, but they went eastward and they wanted to enslave the Slavic peoples to the east. So I don't know where you're getting this idea that fascism means we are just going to have an inward expression of the colonial policy. I mean, the opposite is true. Fascism is an expansion of the colonial policy to unprecedented heights. And you're saying that the forms of control and social control that were used for colonial subjugation are being applied inward. I just don't see how that's true. I think in the case of fascism, you do have political repression because it's this extra legal suspension of all civil liberties at home. But by and large, you have the enslavement and subjugation still of outsiders or of minorities, in the case of Germany, of like Jews and gypsies or whatever, marginals in your own country. Primarily to use as kind of like, a scapegoat or something. But I'm just not sure where you're getting this idea that fascism is just this kind of inward turn. And also, you can't name any Marxist-Leninist authors who agree with you. I'm not sure why that represents the communist consensus. And even if it doesn't represent the communist consensus and I should just take it on the merits of the argument itself, I don't find that a particularly persuasive argument.
Yeah, I don't see why, for any reason other than intellectual dishonesty, you would act like I said the two things were mutually exclusive. You can bring the colonial policy to the metropole, and you can also seek to expand your colonial holdings. The other thing that's really frustrating about this conversation so
What
far
colonial policies
is
were brought to the metropole?
a police state.
Yeah, the police state for the Germans and the Italians, again, was against political dissent. But the colonial policy that the Germans applied to Slavs and the colonial policy that the Italians applied to Ethiopians and Libyans, in terms of its, not only like in terms of its structure, but also in terms of its barbarousness and whatever. I mean, there's nothing comparable about those two things whatsoever. The brutality
So there's nothing comparable
and the
about the
repression
treatment
of the brutality and the repression of colonized peoples under fascist states was nothing compared. I mean, like it was so much more. I mean, than what they were doing at home.
You realize the Holocaust was done at home,
The
right?
overwhelming
First and
majority
foremost,
of the victims of the Holocaust were in the East, and were massacred in the East and taken
yes,
from the
but
East.
mostly by forces that were trying to do the same thing that Nazi, like by the Durlawanga Brigade, by Ukrainians, by fellow Slavs, etc.
Why is that relevant?
It's relevant because the movement itself, like what it is doing, the policies it's enacting, they're like the regime is still.
Hello?
Okay, it's relevant because you were bringing it up, right? Like you were making it about that.
No, you said, well, what about the Holocaust? And I said, well, that was also an extension of the colonial barbarism of German
Yes,
fascism.
and in its extension outward, it was mostly undertaken by people who were local to its victims, and so the victims of the
I'm not
Holocaust
sure if that was true, but even if it
were the
was,
local.
I fail to see its relevance here. Because you said fascism is an internalization, can be defined as an internalization of the colonial policy. I'm
Yes,
arguing
that's
that,
exactly what it was towards German Jews, which is the
yeah,
relevant.
yeah, but the overwhelming majority of the victims of fascism were not inward.
Okay, that doesn't mean that the
So why are you
change
primarily
that doesn't
characterizing
mean
it
that
as
the
that?
change that was initiated by fascism wasn't a turning inward of colonial technologies of governance, right?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, you're allowed not to think so. It's just
Can you
it's a
provide evidence for that? Or
definition
can
of
you provide an
fascism.
argument to support that?
Can I provide an argument to support? Well, yeah, the SS was modeled after colonial police forces. The domestic
It
actions of
was, hold
fascism.
on. The SS was modeled after colonial police forces strictly in the context of the colonized lands to the east over which the SS was exercising the majority of its jurisdiction. So
Yes, and then
how
they
it was being
exercised that
implied
same
domestically.
jurisdiction over German citizens. What is so unclear about this?
All right, how were the German Nazis colonizing German citizens?
I didn't say colonizing them. I said
Okay, how are
using
they
the techniques
practicing
of governance.
colonial practices against Germans?
Yes, things like the cataloging of people based on their national and ethnic and physiological differences. These are the things that were
America
learned in
does that.
experience. Yes, of course,
Every
America.
modern country does that. The USSR did that. The USSR
Right.
definitely
Yes,
cataloged
yes.
people based on their differences.
Sure, there's a difference between taking a census and taking a census that they're then going to use to mass murder people.
Okay, but the majority of the mass murder was happening outside of Germany.
Yes. Okay. Let's take the U.S. as an example. Why not? So the lessons learned in the Phoenix program, right? The assassination and um,
This was the
human.
census in the United States predated the Nazis. If you're gonna bring this shit up,
What
just to be
predated the
clear.
Nazis?
The census program in the U.S.
Yeah, it's not about the census program exactly. It's about the use of the data that you would collect in a census and expanding the type of data that you do collect to then use that for counterinsurgency, for identifying people who might become threats to the state,
The
and then
USSR also did that.
preemptively lighting them on fire in
The
cars and shit.
USSR also did that, probably before the Nazis did.
Right, and so did they use it to, like,
For
quell
counterinsurgency and to
dissidents
detect if
and
people
kill
are going to be more
citizens?
likely to be counter-revolutionary or not?
Are you
Yes,
calling
probably on
the
a
USSR
scale
a police
much
state?
larger, actually.
Would you call the USSR a police state?
I wouldn't, but it seems like you are.
How does it seem like I'm doing that?
Because you're defining a police state based on cataloging people to see if they're more likely to be counter-revolutionary or not, or to be insurgents or not, something like that.
Yeah, you use this information that you collect. You have, the advent of computers around this time, and then you crunch the numbers and you say, oh, it looks like this person might, throw a Molotov cocktail at a bank
Are you
or
talking about
something,
like algorithms
kill
now?
them. No, I mean, this is pre-algorithmic. This is just spreadsheets and shit. This
Okay.
is Vietnam War era and before.
Okay. Well, that I don't. I'm not sure why you're bringing. We went from trying to understand why the LGBT movement is inherently progressive, why my rhetoric is fascist, to what that fascism means of, I don't know, some exertion of the colonial policy inwards, and that, oh yeah, you made the argument that my rhetoric is fascist because I'm positing an internal enemy. The reason that's inherently fascist is because fascism was the internalization of colonialism or something. It's just extremely incoherent argument. I mean, those two things don't even follow. I mean, like, how could my positing of an internal enemy, supposedly, right? How could it be justified to say that that's inherently fascist? Because even if I were to grant you the ahistorical idea that fascism is just the internalization of colonial policy, I mean, how does it follow that that justifies the idea that having an internal enemy is fascist?
Sure. You actually, you've reminded me of enough of my points that I can kind of tie them together now. So the reason this positing of an internal enemy is fascist. The reason that this relates to the internalizing of colonial forms of governance, to the home populace. Uh, if there is this internal enemy, right? If we've decided, if you've decided that LGBT people are all unreversibly psyoped,
When did
and
I
will
say
never
that?
be able to. I know you haven't said that, but
All right,
you've
just for the
implied
sake
it
of
enough
argument,
time.
then go ahead.
So if you've got all of this number crunching, and all of this data collection that you're going to use to make sure your regime doesn't lose power, um, well, it's not just going to like sit there idly. You're going to like make use of it. And the other thing about fascism is that because it's also an externalization of these same forces, right? You keep representing my point as if I said it is only the bringing back to the metropole, et cetera, whatever bullshit quote I was making, just because you like forced me to come up with one. Um, the reason that uh, it is still externalizing these forces is that you actually never run out of internal enemies, right?
Okay.
You never run out of external ones either,
Sure.
and that's why fascist movements just kind of
Beautiful.
peter themselves out after
So I take
making
it.
two enemies.
I
But
take it you mean to say that the logical conclusion of my rhetoric, which somehow antagonizes LGBT people, is a police state where we're going to catalog everyone who's LGBT. That's quite the leap. But even if I were to
no, see,
grant,
no,
even if
no.
I were to
You're
grant you
just
that,
made the leap there. I don't think your
hold
rhetoric
on,
has any kind of
Margot,
practical
Margot,
logical conclusion.
you're making a lot of
I,
assumptions. Hold on, you're getting really excited about your own stupidity right now. So you're making quite an extraordinary leap, but I'll grant you the leap. If you're going to characterize every modern state as fascist, what is the use of the word fascism anymore? Everyone has to be fascist if they're going to be ruling a modern state.
yeah, I think you've just made a leap there.
Really? Because the way you've described cataloging people based on their propensity to be enemies of the state is a characteristic and feature of every modern state, including the
Yeah,
communist
it's
ones.
almost like every modern state has like learned something from those fascist projects.
Okay, well, the USSR had that before fascism came into power. I mean, so I don't know why. So they
I
couldn't have
also
learned it from fascists
I
if they
really
pioneered
don't
it
care
before
about what
fascists
was
did.
the case in the USSR. It
Sorry?
matters so very little to me.
Okay, it may matter very little to you, but for purposes of being like logically consistent and minimally coherent from a historical perspective, I think it matters a lot to anyone who cares about that, right? So
Yeah, I mean, you also have the privilege of just exaggerating every point that I make, as if I've given like an exhaustive definition of
well,
anything.
you're accusing me of exaggerating, but we went from me questioning why the LGBT movement is inherently progressive to this idea that I'm going to have a police registry of every LGBT person
No,
as
you
an
went to that.
internal threat.
Like you're the one who said that. I don't think that
All
you'll
right.
ever hold power, so I don't think that you'll ever like
Okay. Well,
be
I mean,
leader
like
of a
you're saying that I would have the intention of doing that hypothetically if I was in power, right? So,
Well,
anyway,
no. What I really think is that you use the arguments and the language of people who would want that if they ever held power. Those people will never hold power
okay.
either,
Again,
but it
this
doesn't
is
really
the
matter.
problem with that type of reasoning is that it's once again the thing of like, okay, if Nazis think the sky is blue and I think the sky is blue, is does thinking the sky is blue and that inherently Nazi? Like, you have to tell me
Yeah, but
why
the
uniquely.
sky isn't like a person. The sky
All
isn't a
right,
type of
I'm
person
not.
who
I'm
you
not.
might,
Okay.
act
Even if I
negatively
would
towards.
grant you that there is this coincidence of fascists happening to be thinking that well, I think fascists first of all do think LGBT movement is progressive. They just reject the idea of progress. First of all, right? But second of all, even if I were to grant you that for some reason fascists say the same things that I do, you can't just hide behind the authority of that coincidence. You have to show me logically, show me rationally why that is fascist. What is fascist about it? Tell me why fascists use that rhetoric.
Bigotry. I think you're a
Okay.
bigot. I think you're a bigot, Haz.
Okay, what does that mean?
Do you have access to a dictionary?
No, I want you to put it in your own words.
Okay, I think LGBT people make you uncomfortable because they're different from you, and I think that discomfort leads you to make a bunch of sweeping political generalizations about the
Okay.
efficacy of their movement
So
and
all
the
I
things
did
that
was
they are
ask.
doing to communism.
So I made no normative judgment whatsoever about the LGBT
Oh, don't
movement.
act like motherfucker. You are so fucking stupid. You're just the dumbest piece of shit who's ever lived.
I don't know why you're
Fuck
getting
off and
emotional.
die.
You're getting
Suck
a
my
little
fucking
emotional.
cock, bro.
All right, you're getting a little emotional, and he left. Okay, look, why is that justified? I just asked you, like, I didn't make any normative judgment. I just asked a simple question. Why is the LGBT movement inherently progressive? And why, hypothetically, is the LGBT movement used as the measurement of whether someone's fascist or not? I just want to know what's fascist about rejecting the LGBT movement. I mean, I don't know if I would even say I reject the LGBT movement. I just want to know why people use that to define what fascism is. Because I'm reading Dimitrov, and I read Dimitrov. I've read the classics of Marxism, Leninism, and for them, fascism is very clearly defined as the rule of the open dictatorship of the most reactionary and warmongering elements of finance capital. I mean, nowhere in there do I find anything about I don't know, sexual minorities or something. I don't know why that's relevant to what fascism is. I don't know why that's relevant to why people define it. I want to know why all these Marxists, where are you getting your idea of progress? Is progress just following the latest agenda that's adopted in institutions? Now, to be a little bit good faith, I think a lot of these people say, okay, this trend was adopted by MTV on the TV, which means it has become historically consolidated as an irreversible form of progress, and therefore anyone who is indifferent to it or is not getting on board with it must be a reactionary. But why are you using the media and corporations as the barometer of what is an irreversible form of progress when those things often contradict to the actual cultural trends that take root in society, not just from the top down as some kind of social engineering project? So, okay, is there... all right, well, again, I'm being calm here, right? I don't know why people get so fucking emotional when I bring this up. I want to know why these people are using the word fascism in the way they are. Again, fascism, in terms of its psychological characteristics, is indistinguishable if you just look at it from ultra-leftism, right? It's a form of psychological perversion. It's a form of psychosis, right? Psychologically. But its linchpin is war. I don't know how you can have this idea that all of these anti-war people could be fascists when fascism can clearly be defined by pro-war chauvinism. By the way, when these people used the word chauvinism, they weren't talking about a guy manspreading on the subway. They were talking about the warmongering policy of the state and by the ruling class to attack other countries and attack, subjugate, and enslave other nations. I mean, that's what chauvinism meant in the communist lexicon, okay? It didn't mean manspreading on the subway or microaggressions, yada, yada, yada. So I just want to know why leftists are using the word fascism in the way they are. I also want to point out that, and I'm going to read you Dimitrov himself, right, to show you why, if you're against Pat Socks, you know, you are at the very minimum aiding and abetting fascism. Because in his section about the ideological struggle against fascism, so Dimitrov points it out as a weakness that one of the weakest aspects of the anti-fascist struggle of our parties is that they inadequately react and too slowly to the fascist demagoguery and neglect the problem with struggling against fascist ideology. So this is what they say, right? Fascists are rummaging through the entire history of every nation so as to be able to pose as the heirs and continuers of all that was exalted and heroic in the past. And, you know, they're lying about the German nation and the history of the German nation. He gives several examples. Mussolini is trying to be the heir of Garibaldi. French fascists are trying to be the heirs of Joan of Arc. American fascists are appealing to the founding fathers and Lincoln. The Bulgarian fascists are making use of the historical national liberation movement of the 70s and its heroes beloved by the people, Vasilevsky, Stepan Karaj, and others. Now, what Dimitrov says is that communists who oppose that all this has nothing to do with the cause of the working class, who do nothing to enlighten the masses on the past of their people in a historically correct fashion, in a genuinely Marxist-Leninist spirit, who do nothing to link up the present struggle with the people's revolutionary traditions and past, voluntarily hand over to the fascist falsifiers all that is valuable in the historical past of the nations, so that the fascists may fool the masses. So Dimitrov is spelling it out outright. He's saying that all of these so-called leftists who are not interpreting history in a Marxist-Leninist way and reclaiming all of these figures in a communistic way are handing over to the fascist falsifiers all that is valuable. Now, the reason I'm going to say that the anti-Patsocks in the American context are just fascists outright is because they directly agree with the fascists that all of these great historical figures, at least in the eye of the majority of the people in the countries within which they're trying to operate, they're agreeing with the fascists that these are inherently fascist figures and yada, yada, yada. These are inherently Nazi figures. So in Dimitrov's words, they're handing over to the fascist falsifiers all that is valuable. And then Dimitrov says, we are concerned with every important question, not only of the present and future, but also of the past and of our own peoples. We communists do not pursue a narrow policy based on the craft interests of the workers. We are not narrow-minded trade union functionaries or leaders of medieval guilds. We are representative of the class interests of the most important and greatest class of modern society. So what that means is that while we oppose, in principle, bourgeois nationalism in all its forms, we are not supporters of national nihilism. This is what Dimitrov says, and we should never act as such. The task of educating the workers and all working people in the spirit of proletarian internationalism is one of the fundamental tasks of the Communist Party. But anyone who thinks that this permits him or even compels him to sneer at the national sentiments of the broad masses of working people is far from being a genuine Bolshevik and has understood nothing of the teaching of Lenin on the national question. And then he quotes Lenin to point out that national pride is important and that we do have national pride. So he said, I think, comrades, that when at the Reichstag fire trial the fascists tried to slander the Bulgarians as a barbarous people, I was not wrong in taking up the defense of the national honor of the working masses of the Bulgarian people, who are struggling heroically against the fascist usurpers. I had no cause to be ashamed of being a Bulgarian, and on the contrary, I was proud of being the son of the heroic Bulgarian working class. Now, if you're going to say, oh, that's because the Bulgarians were oppressed, at the time that Dimitrov was writing this, there was a huge fascist movement within Bulgaria. Well, the fascists within Bulgaria eventually assumed power. They assumed the reins of power. Okay? So he's saying that in spite of that fact, right? He said, proletarian internationalism must, so to speak, acclimatize itself in each country in order to strike deep roots in the native land. These are language that we have used, we so-called Patsocks have used, and because of this language, we were called fascist. Dimitrov, in each country in order to strike deep roots in its native land. National forms of proletarian class struggle and of the labor movement in the individual countries are in no contradiction to proletarian internationalism. On the contrary, it is precisely in these forms that the international interests of the proletariat can be successfully defended. So Dimitrov is spelling it out directly. Without the national forms, the international interests of the proletarian class cannot be successfully defended. It is only within the national form that proletarian internationalism that can be defended. That's what Dimitrov says. Okay? Now, it goes without saying that it is everywhere and on all occasions to expose before the masses and to prove to them concretely The fascist bourgeoisie, on the pretext of defending general national interests, in conducting its selfish policy of oppressing and exploiting its own people, as well as robbing and enslaving other nations. So we oppose that, right? But we must not confuse ourselves to this, confine ourselves to this. We must at the same time prove by the very struggle of the working class and of the actions of the communist parties that the proletariat, in rising against every manner of bondage and national oppression, is the only true fighter for national freedom and the independence of the people. The interests of the class struggle of the proletariat against its native exploiters and oppressors are not in contradiction to the interests of a free and happy future of the nation. On the contrary, the socialist revolution will signify the salvation of the nation and will open it up to the road of loftier heights. Language we have used that they used as evidence that we're fascists and we're using fascist sentiment. Here's Dimitrov saying it directly to teach communists how to fight fascism. He said, socialist revolution will signify the salvation of the nation and will open up to it the road to loftier heights. Loftier heights of the nation, salvation of the nation. Imagine if we used this language. By the very fact of building at the present time its class organizations and consolidating its positions, by the very fact of defending democratic rights and liberties against fascism, and mind you, what that means concretely does not mean something about toilets. Democratic rights and liberties are our democratic rights and liberties. You know, the ones that have been under assault by things like the Patriot Act and under the Obama regime and, even under Trump, but I don't know if that was by him or the people controlling him. Doesn't matter either way. And now under Biden, are actual bourgeois democratic rights and liberties, not this ambiguous, academically contrived idea of liberation that they have. These are now under assault. And it's progressives leading the way in their campaign to promote censorship. You look at the source material, you read Dimitrov, and then you ask the question, how the fuck are we fascists? How do these people sustain the idea that we're somehow fascists? How are they defining fascism? Where are they getting this very bizarre, very, very bizarre idea of what fascism is? Where are they getting it from? Look at this. The revolutionary proletariat is fighting to save the culture of the people, to liberate it from the shackles of decaying monopoly capitalism, from barbarous fascism, which is laying violent hands on it. Only the proletarian revolution can avert the destruction of culture and raise it to its highest flowering as a truly national culture, national in form and socialist in content, which is being realized in the Soviet Union before our eyes. I mean, we say this word for word. I mean, I want you guys to do a test. If you get into an argument with one of these Twitter dumbasses, just repeat Dimitrov and act like it's your own words. Like, oh my God, this is such fascist language. Again, I'm interested in knowing why we are... So Dimitrov has a very specific understanding of fascism. Now, clearly it has nothing to do with an understanding that the class struggle is deeply national in nature, that communists have to be deeply national and deeply patriotic. Has nothing to do with that. So now we have to ask the question, it's about the culture war. Well, why is taking a position on the culture war of indifference or even rejection of these latest trends pushed by the corporate America and the corporate media, why is that inherently fascist? What is inherently fascist about that? They're saying, well, having conservative social values. Well, this is the thing. The Soviet Union had very conservative social values. Almost every communist state had very conservative social values. China today, I mean, they are pursuing a very family-oriented policy of pronatalism, which is extremely conservative compared to America. I mean, they're encouraging women to have children you know, encouraging families like no state has ever done before. Is that fascist? I mean, a lot of leftists say that China is fascist because of things like that, right? But I think people have this idea that, you know, fascists represent the deeply national, you know, atavistic revival of the nation. I mean, it's two people who characterize fascism this way. Fascists themselves and these dumb fuck mystifiers and falsifiers coming from the left who are giving the fascists what they want, which is the nation. As Dimitrov said, they're handing over the nation to the fascists. They're agreeing with the fascists' false pretensions. Dimitrov said the fascists are not deeply national. They serve international finance capital. They pretend and disguise themselves in the forms of the nation with all this mystical, obfuscatory bullshit that they're representing the true, authentic nation. Dimitrov says no, they are lying. They're falsifying that. But the leftists, the ultra-leftists are here saying, they're saying, no, the fascists are right. That is truly the nation. We have to curb our national instincts and curb our sentiments and all hold hands in a circle together because fascism is really scary. It's like Thor, the god of thunder. It's really scary. It's like thunder, right? They're literally jacking off the fascists and fulfilling their twisted little fantasy for them instead of pushing back in any capacity. They are fascists, two sides of the same coin. Thank you, Morlock. Appreciate you.
You're not allowed to make an argument. Guy claiming he's a communist, that's calling other people fascists.
It's unbelievable. Thank you, Degenerate
Karl
Gaming.
Marx rejected feminism and anti-racism when it detracted from the wider class
Oh,
struggle.
I mean, I'm going to get into that as well. About what Marx had to say about people who detracted too much from the class struggle. Thank you, Franklin.
Enjoying
Appreciate
your
you, man.
streams, man. Keep it up.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you, Chris Morlock.
Are we anti-Semitic because we reject Zionism and the Israeli state? Are we anti-normative gender when we criticize the LGBT political movement?
Thank you, Mahab.
I haven't heard a peep from Antifa regarding the Azov
I haven't
battalion.
either. That's a good point. I haven't heard a peep from Antifa about the Azov battalion. They don't talk about that. We're gonna talk about that,
Fascism is
actually.
when you hurt liberals' feelings in any way today.
Because I'm going to explain to you what real fascism today would or does look like and what it actually does mean.
Doesn't Hungary have a pro-natalist policy as well?
I'm not sure, Crowsbake, but thank you. So, I'm going to put a pause again. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that you look at the case of the Maidan, and in the Maidan you had this vicious uprising of these urban thugs, these lumpen of Ukraine, supported by international finance capital, and being a quote-unquote anarchist and a banderist was indistinguishable. Being a fascist and an ultra-leftist in that context was totally indistinguishable. America, you have a similar base in terms of these declassed Chaz type of people, these formerly middle-class people who are from the suburbs but got declassed, so they moved to cities, they became heavily urbanized, so there's these thugs and there are these lumpen degenerates, in every meaningful capacity degenerates. These are also the same hooligans that would be the rank and file of fascism. So ironically, the people who make up Antifa in the United States, that is the rank and file of fascism. 100%. 100%. Fascism has never represented any authentic, deeply nationally rooted reality. It has always been an exaggerated form of pageantry in order to use the nation as this edgy way to kind of give expression to the inherent contradictions within liberalism. Well, ultra-leftists and so-called anarchists, they do the exact same thing, whether they're Maoists, whether they're anarchists. All they do is perversely give expression to the contradictions internal to liberalism instead of actually offering a positive alternative. In terms of the culture war, they point out various cultural inequalities that persist in the sphere of culture, and they basically wear this as their mark to point out how liberalism is not able to achieve equality in the sphere of culture, And that's this inherent contradiction within liberalism. But Marx and Engels had already pointed out that equality is an inherently bourgeois principle in the first place. You can't apply equality outside of the sphere of political forms. So making a fuss of that it's all you're doing is giving expression and giving manifestation to the psychosis of liberalism, which is unable to reconcile itself with the fact that it has to confine itself only to a very specific sphere of society, which is the state and legal forms, despite being an ideology which is meant to encompass and account for the whole of society. So liberalism, whereupon it encounters these kinds of contradictions, and I'm just talking about this on an ideological level, not even from a materialist level, right? It gives rise to fascism. And leftists are just as much culpable in that as actual fascists. Actually, I don't know what an actual fascist is in America. You look at the Azovites in Ukraine, and they are outright neo-Nazi fascists. You have neo-Nazis in the United States, outright neo-Nazis. It's just, I'm not sure those people will be numerous or strong enough to actually give expression to the actual fascist tendency that we're witnessing in this country, which is most definitely coming from the ultra-left. And all you have to do is look at that from the perspective of which social force within the United States is doing the most to accelerate the destruction of bourgeois democracy and basic bourgeois liberties. It is clearly the ultra-leftists. It's clearly these Nazlibs, right? Now, it is also neo-Nazis, to be fair. It is also them. But who primarily, right? It's, on the one hand, the Nazi terrorists and criminals who are from the same social class, by the way, as the ultra-leftists. And on the other hand, it's also the ultra-leftists on an institutional level. So on a civil society level, it's the neo-Nazis. On an institutional level, it's the ultra-leftists. On the dark web, it's the neo-Nazis. On the surface web, it's the ultra-leftists. The two come from the same class and are working indirectly together to give rise to a fascism in the 21st century. So I see Margot is back for more, apparently. I mean, maybe they calmed down, they had a few breaths, and they're ready to actually engage with what I said. Maybe they went and read something, and they kind of rage quit last time. So I'll give them another chance, and let's see what they've got to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention in this context of, political action that accelerates the breakdown of democracy, and, which side is doing more of that. I think the lone wolf type of attacks, modeled after Timothy McVeigh, and explicitly sort of far-right figure, I think that really, says more about the actions that are being taken to undermine democracy, and which side is most culpable in that. And I think the fact that you're saying the ultra-left is somehow, to blame, that is a strange aspect of your rhetoric that I think you might want to take a look at.
Okay, well, I don't see how it's strange when he just left. When I just pointed out that they work together. One's doing it on the dark web and one is doing it on the surface web. And that, I don't know if that's not an explicit reference to these people carrying out these I mean, it literally mentioned neo-Nazi terrorists. What do you think that was in reference to? But the thing is that in those cases, there is an awfully uncanny amount of connections to, let's just say, certain authorities. I'm glad you mentioned Timothy McVeigh, because that's far enough into the past that I'm going to be allowed to talk about it. Yeah, that was glowed up. Okay, that guy Timothy McVeigh was pretty much groomed by the CIA to do what he did. So, you have, and all of that is on the record and it's all out there, right? So almost every single one of these cases, you have these very strange connections to the security departments and apparatuses and agencies within this country, security agencies primarily, intelligence agencies, yada, yada, yada. And then you have to ask the question, if these neo-Nazis are just being used, what is the actual ideology of this deep state and of these security agencies, which is promoting all of these horrific criminal and terrorist acts against the American people? Well, it's not just Nazism, it's something that makes the Nazism superfluous. It is the ultimate form of liberal nihilism, for which Nazism is just, you know, the expression within civil society. It includes Nazism, it includes all these ideas about eugenics, but the only difference from Nazism is that they're laughing their way to the bank at the mythological pretensions that this somehow involves the people. Oh, the Nazis are saying the German people, the fascists said the Italian people. The real people who are behind fascism and who are funding and financing this shit, the real people behind these evil, demonic forces, they're laughing their way to the bank at this idea, right? They believe all the stuff about eugenics and, you know, chauvinism and the social Darwinism and all that kind of shit. They do believe in that, don't get me wrong, but they don't buy into any of this like pseudo-populist demagogue type of shit that somehow is relevant to the majority of people. They're not loyal to any people. They're not loyal to any masses. They dupe the masses and they dupe the people using the pageantry of Nazism and fascism and national whatever. They use this pageantry to dupe the people. They don't give a fuck about anyone, though. All they care about is not even themselves as a class, but worshiping whatever fucking demon, worshiping whatever agenda they have in mind that they think is the ultimate expression of, you know, what it means to be human. I mean, the rabbit hole goes real deep. I'm not going to pretend I know the whole story, but let's just say the farther you go into the rabbit hole, this fucking scarier it gets in terms of what's really motivating these people to do what they do. But regardless of what's motivating them, I'm talking about just on the like ideological level. Obviously, on a material level, we know all of this shit is coming from the decadence and the decay of capitalism and of monopoly capitalism in particular, and it's trying to save itself. But the way that manifests itself ideologically and religiously, and I don't know if you'd call it religious, more kind of like a cult. It's pretty fucking scary stuff if you go put a deep dive into it. But regardless, you know, who is closest to that ideology that we could see on the surface? I think it is ultra-leftists. I think ultra-leftists are closest to that ideology because they have the most destructive and nihilistic attitude toward humanity. And they don't make any pretense to demagogic appeal to the masses in any capacity. They literally say, we hate the masses, we're against the masses don't even exist, they're just the sum total of individuals and atoms. All they do is just appeal to individually contrived identities and basically say, the only real thing is what an individual chooses. I mean, this is Luciferian Satanism, which is, I think, closest to the actual ideology of the ruling class. Although it's not the same because the ruling class also laughs at the leftist moralism and idea that this is, you know, to be just or to make people more equitable and to make life happier for people and whatever. I mean, they laugh at that idea, but they do share in common, you know, with leftists, this basic idea that the only thing that's real is what comes out of the mind of the individual, that everything else is somehow, you know, false, or it's a sham, or it has to be destroyed or liquefied or something like that. So, by the way, can you guys hear my Twitter right now? You guys can hear me clearly in the Twitter space? I'm getting some comments, some people saying they cannot hear me that clearly. Not sure why people are saying that. Not sure at all why people are saying that. But anyway, you know, all this rhetoric against Pat socks, you have to notice that the reason that it's becoming popular is not because MLs are becoming more popular. It's because these NATO Nazlibs, supporters of the Azov, the Azovites, those types of people have, you know, they know about quote unquote Pat socks. They know that we are the most ferocious opponents of Zelensky's apocalyptic delusions and the the pro-thermonuclear extinction contingent from Europe who wants to drag America into World War III. They know we are the most vocal opponents of that, and we're also some of the most effective opponents of that because we combine genuine and authentic patriotism with an anti-war and anti-imperialist position. And they know that's a winning message, so that's why these people are the most vicious opponents of us more than anyone. So you're seeing in real time a unity of the Nazlibs and all of the fake Baizwo MLs, the people who pretend to be Marxist-Leninists, but are, as a matter of fact, Nazis, and more specifically, Nazlibs. And we need to start popularizing that term, ladies and gentlemen, Nazlibs, because it's a real thing. So these are Nazlibs, right? That's what we're dealing with. They call us Nazbols, which is purely projection. The only thing they get right about is that we are Bolsheviks, right? We are Marxist-Leninists. So what they're doing is they're actually talking about Nazlibs. They're talking about these libs who are, that's what they're projecting. That's what they fucking are. They're liberals who are becoming so psychotic that they're transforming and they're fusing into Nazism, outright Nazism. And you do see a spontaneous, implicit solidarity between outright neo-Nazis and ultra-leftists, specifically when it comes to like the people who are against us. They get along really well when it comes to opposing us, and that is not for that's not accidental, right? That's for a reason. And the reason is because they come from the same, they have the same cause. Now you might say, Haas, what about you and the so-called Patsocks? Don't you represent some exhibiting of the contradiction of liberalism? And the answer is no. We actually locate the object of politics and of our ideology to be outside of bourgeois liberalism and liberal forms. We offer a positive vision of a nation. We don't have a negative vision of a nation like Nazis do, just in the sense of like it's purely this abstract negative unity that excludes others, and it's just defined in this very strict way of this certain amount of blood quantum of this. We have a view of a nation which comes from the socialist realist aesthetic, right? The dialectic between content and form. We have an understanding of the nation that goes deep. We have a clear message of reconciliation and renewal and rebirth and awakening. We have a positive vision that can definitely sustain itself and can definitely survive without just dwelling in the negation and of opposing everything and opposing everything else. We have a positive vision of uniting communist consciousness with the broad strata of the working people in this country and within all countries for that matter, depending on their local characteristics. We have a positive vision. We have something positive to offer. We don't just dwell in bourgeois institutions like the social parasites that call themselves communists to complain about the fact that things aren't equal enough. We don't do that shit. We don't parasitically, work in these big tech companies and all these fucking corporate environments to socially re-engineer everything to make them more equitable over the fuck these people are doing, like Hollywood. We have our own vision for building a working class movement, right? In no way are we like fascists who are just trying to point out, the contradiction posed by the nation and by national differences to the form of the liberal state. Because their response to that, by the way, is just suspending bourgeois democracy entirely and replacing it with an open and explicit dictatorship. Our response to that is that it's knocking on an open door. We can preserve the best and most valuable things about bourgeois democracy while also accounting for and recognizing the national reality, specifically in the form of the party of the working class, which does it, which recognizes that in the best way possible. And today I saw this dumb fucking tweet that managed to get 15,000 likes. And these are the same people, by the way, who are liking and promoting and retweeting all of the tweets against so-called Patsocks. But it was specifically saying that it's a myth the USSR was against racism. And that actually, look at all the deportations that happened in World War II. And look at the fact that Russians still, were ruling most of the USSR. A few things. all that came from that was also a response to the bourgeois MLs giving false representation to the USSR's anti-racism by trying to make it seem like it was like an expression of liberal anti-racism. Like the USSR was like, you know, a 1990s Sesame Street episode where everyone's saying, oh, it's a rainbow nation, and everyone's saying, one big... No, that's not what's fucking going on in the USSR. National differences and traditions and identities are definitely being preserved and given a solid basis. What's going on is that people are coexisting on a basis of mutual respect. But the national realities are not being overcome. They're not being liquefied. People aren't just becoming these cosmopolitan, rootless, you know, citizens of civil society, these urban hipsters in New York who are blending together everything. And that's not what's fucking going on. You have a solid, you have these solid nationalities, these solid, you know, ethnicities that are interacting with each other based on concrete relations of mutual respect. And there's nothing in common with the liberal view, right? You know, and those differences were celebrated and preserved, right? They were by no means, you know, seen as, oh, this is inherent equality. We need to address the inequality between Russians and others. I mean, Russians were the majority of the Soviet Union. Soviet civilization was heavily the heir, mostly the heir to Russian civilization, although there was also something going on in Central Asia, which, in my view, showed that there is an even further syncretism going on with other civilizations historically, specifically the Central Asian ones. But regardless, the USSR was a civilizational state. Liberals don't have civilizational states. They either have globalist, universal states that rule as naked police dictatorships over everyone indiscriminately, or they have mono-ethnic, you know, ethno-states, which have a very strict formal definition of what the ethnicity is, right? So that's liberalism, right? That has nothing to do with the USSR's attitude toward nationalities. And I want to keep emphasizing again that when you know, this idea of communism being a rainbow, you know, whatever, there's nothing rainbow about communism. There's nothing rainbow about it. Matter of fact, I'm not against the LGBT movement, but I hate that fucking rainbow flag. Can I say that? Can I say that the rainbow is like this MK Ultra psychological engineering scary type of shit that is just this extremely liquidationist aesthetic? I mean, it is totally antithetical to communism on a basic aesthetic level. And people might say aesthetics are not important. I think they are important, okay? Because it's this idea of universalistic, indeterminate difference. You know, it's everything all at once. Everything all at once. What's the quintessential psychosis of American liberalism and American globalist unipolarity? So you have to understand that, you know, when fascism comes to this country, it's going to be draped in a rainbow flag, okay? It's going to be draped in the same universalistic flag of indeterminate differences. It's going to be the sun wheel with a goddamn rainbow flag, you know? And it's going to say, this is the ultimate culmination of Aryan spiritual development, total universal achievement of transcendence, and only the enlightened. You know, let me tell you another thing. You know, white means all colors, right? White reflects all colors, okay? So when you see the rainbow flag, I mean, that's a white, that means white, okay? That means a white flag, okay? That's inherently what it means, okay? So you got to understand what's going on here. And yeah, it's also hideous and very ugly. And I'm allowed to have that opinion. I am allowed to have that opinion and view. You would never see that flag being flown in the USSR or in China or any communist state, you know, it's unthinkable. You know the thing about the guy they lied about who got to put in a he was shot for having a flag of the tricolor, which was a lie. He wasn't shot because he proposed the tricolor. He was shot because he was embezzling state funds in order to, by the way, prop up the czarist era, westernized and Europeanized ruling class center, which was Leningrad, or today St. Petersburg, or before St. Petersburg. That's why they were shot. It was actually because they were not populous. They were elitists. That's why there were coinciding campaigns against both cosmopolitanism and, I emphasize, bourgeois nationalism. Now, bourgeois nationalism, I don't know what this word bourgeois means in most people's heads on fucking Twitter or on the internet or I don't know, on IRL organizations or in fucking among leftists in general. But bourgeois means a cosmopolitan urban dweller. That's what bourgeois means, okay? So bourgeois nationalism is very strictly a form of, formalistic kind of elitist, heavily urbanized nationalism. It has nothing to do with, the deep and rugged quote-unquote nationalism they're associating with us, which is more Maoist, Maoist, and it's more Stalinistic. It's more rugged and actually reflecting of the character of the actual people and not these contrived, bourgeois social engineers trying to create an idea of the nation from thin air. So, yeah. So there's a guy who types in chat that goes, "You are clueless." I would love to hear an argument about why I'm clueless. Can't say that I'm getting angry because I stay calm and other people get angry and just rage quit. So, all you got to do is, it'd be so, if you really want to stop infrared, instead of making tweets and all this cringy shit, I mean, all you would really have to do is like debate me and actually win. What does it mean to win? Well, it just means like come here, show me that I either don't have knowledge about the thing that I'm talking about. It doesn't hold to reason or it doesn't hold to history. I'm getting it wrong somehow. And hold your own by actually responding to what I'm saying and breaking down my arguments. You notice every time my opponents debate me, I articulate their argument in my own words correctly. And the reason I do that is to show them that I understand what you are trying to say. And since we made it clear that I understand what you are trying to say, here's why it's wrong. Never have any of my opponents been able to articulate what I am trying to say, proving that they actually understand it, and give a response to it. They've never actually done that. They never actually succeed in doing anything like that. It's always this failed attempt to basically just, dismiss me as saying something meaningless, yada, 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 right? So it's just a shame that nobody's receiving the call to actually debate about this, because I'm really curious about why the LGBT movement is an index of progress. What is progressive about it? And why would someone who opposed it, why would that make them a reactionary or a fascist, right? Because reaction and progress, these are words that are talking about historical changes that have actually taken place, which are materially irreversible. You have to understand that reaction is always a vanity. It's always something that fails. It's not actually something that can succeed just by definition. You can't turn back the wheels of time. So usually reactionary forces will implement laws and will implement, by force, organized forms of cope, where basically they're going to be like, okay, we're just going to deny reality outright. You're like, you're denying the minorities. And it's like, no, that's not true, right? For example, having laws against pedophilia and bestiality and incest, for example, that's not... how is that reactionary? I don't get how that would be reactionary, right? Well, you're preventing people. Like, reaction is not defined by how much freedom people have to do things. Reaction is defined by trying to turn back the wheels of time in some kind of way, right? And just because you see something on MTV doesn't mean it's actually changed reality in a fundamental way. You know, we are at the point where it's not really that we're like reacting to some scary, you know, cultural norm that is like inevitably taking hold. It's more we're trying to say that the ways in which they're trying to enforce them have failed, which makes them the reactionaries, actually. It's not like we're here being like, oh yeah, we're trying to deny that. No, we're not denying anything. We know that there's sexual minorities. We know it's always been a thing. What we have to talk about now is what is this LGBT movement trying to accomplish exactly? I mean, first they wanted marriage. Which is fine. I mean, I personally don't care. But I also don't see how that's inherently progressive. I just don't care about it either way. But I still don't understand how it's progressive, because why is that? What is that progressing exactly? Like, what about that is inherently progressive, right? I could tell you why, you know, eliminating slavery was progressive. I could tell you why even civil rights were progressive from the 60s. I could tell you why, you know, even women's suffrage was progressive. I could tell you all those things because it's about formal equality, right? But when it comes to sexuality, when you're trying to formalize sexuality, it starts to get a little weird, right? You're on a totally different ball game. And notice when you press these people, all they can really do is try and compare the LGBT movement to like black people or minorities, which is weird because there's no relation between those two things. I mean, like, you can't use black people as a stand-in for LGBT because they're not comparable. Plainly put, not comparable. But whatever, right? They're saying my rhetoric is fascist or somehow I mean, they can't even give you one reason for why that is. Everyone who just agrees to be a psychotic and who mutually agrees to have that form of copium somehow came to that conclusion, right? So let me unpause these donations. Thank you, Australian Czar.
You are a gigachad for telling the truth.
Thank you, Australian Czar. Appreciate you. Thank you, Ellie Jennings.
Change title to anime is fascism.
I may just do that.
There have been MSM stories about LGBT Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their rights, such as in Donbass Battalion, Nazis, torturers. Much love and support
Thank you,
from an
Australians. I
Australian.
appreciate you, man. Appreciate you so much, man. But anyway, thank you, Both Gang.
Bright colors in cartoons is a MK Ultra op to get kids to like bad substances.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, you know, there's a lot of weird shit. With regard to MK Ultra and the like. Because what I'm trying to say, here's why I think the rainbow aesthetic is MK Ultra. And I'm gonna actually break it down to you in the most coherent way that I can. It's gonna be coherent, trust me. You're gonna understand it, right? So hold on, give me a second.
They are fascist by their own definition. I love your streams. Sorry for being annoying on occasion. I'm funding CPUSA 2036.
Nah, you good, man. You good. Good. Yeah, you are. You're right. But anyway, so when you're dealing with this U.S. government approach to mind control or like, you know, manipulating the senses or like this type of cybernetic control over the human psyche, you're dealing with like this really crude breakdown of phenomenal reality, like the reality that's
Based.
perceptible to the senses.
Watch an anime called Gurren Lagann. It's a Marxist anime about historical materialism and triumph over Malthusianism.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that. But yeah, it's basically like this you know, this turning of the human psyche into an object of abstract engineering, right? And the first way to like give, sorry, how do I fucking put this? The first way to like abstract our senses or the phenomenal world from us in terms of vision is like the what is it called? The visible spectrum, right? So in a really like nihilistic way, the rainbow flag has always kind of like been disturbing to me because it's like this abstract breakdown of the visible spectrum itself, meaning like the essence of everything we see in reality. So like when you see a painting at a museum and it looks super beautiful and whatever, like, oh, actually all of that is just underlying all of that is just the visible spectrum. So this way in which the US kind of like cybernetic paradigm of like reducing the whole world to these mechanized, you know, abstractions, it's just this kind of, it's almost like we can be so fundamentally manipulated in every possible way. Can't tell what's real from what's artificial anymore, right? Does this make sense or does it sound schizo, right? You guys get what I'm saying? Like, it's this breaking down of what's real from what's artificial. Like, am I seeing this painting? Am I seeing anything real in there when I'm seeing some beautiful thing? Or is this just a coincidental organization of the visible spectrum of light in a certain way, accidentally, which can be broken down scientifically and biologically and psychologically, whatever, in this like brutally surgical scientific way, right? So that's what I'm talking about here, right? And you're gonna say I'm fascist for saying this shit. I mean, like, well, this is what other fascists say. I think the majority of self-identified fascists on the internet are just people identifying with what you've labeled them a priori. So first they were just these random conservatives who didn't buy into your bullshit. Then you called them fascists and they were like, you know what? I hate this lefty bullshit so much that I will just unironically identify with that. But does that mean they're inherently fascist? Like, is that the fascism that Dimitrov described? Is it somehow new? How is it new? What about this? I mean, I would love anyone to just explain to me how fascism could exist without war, without having some war agenda. I would love for anyone to, from any Marxist perspective, like explain how you can have fascism without war. Let me put it this way. Can I make it? Would this get me banned on Twitter? Would this get me banned on Twitter or no? Would I be banned on Twitter for saying Hitler would have had neopronouns, which he literally would have? He definitely would have. He most definitely would have. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I will never accept anime. Okay? It's just never gonna happen. Never in a million years. I will never find that acceptable. I will never find that permissible. I will never accept anime. It's just like it's just a fact. So just stop trying, right? But you know, It's just funny how you could tell nobody bothered to do the fucking readings, despite using this word fascism, throwing it around so loosely, which tells you something pretty scary, that most leftists aren't using the language that they do because they've read the primary sources. They're doing it out of some convention, some social convention that was completely artificially created by someone who pretended to interpret it the right way, who didn't. So it just took off. It's literally an argument from authority, right? So let me show you. Let's give an introduction to what Dimitrov actually meant by fascism, right? So it's the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital. Most reactionary variety of fascism is the German type. It has the effrontery to call itself National Socialism. By the way, I'm quoting Dimitrov right now. Now, just to play the devil's advocate, and I would love to see anyone try and push back on this, but just to play the devil's advocate, I could very easily quote Maxim Gorky. But I don't think you guys want to hear what Maxim Gorky had to say about fascism. I don't think you guys want to hear what Maxim Gorky said about. I don't think I agree with it. By the way. But as far as what Maxim Gorky said about fascism, I mean, wow, it just gives you the extent of the diversity of opinions and perspectives that are possible for a Marxist-Leninist in history. And while you might oppose that perspective, you can't call it fascist because Maxim Gorky was an anti-fascist and he wrote that. Okay, now I'm not going to quote that. I wouldn't do that because I understand how offensive so many people would find it. But I'm just saying, let's not throw around this accusation of fascism so lightly when there's a diversity of opinions historically. Now, should people say that today? I mean, if Russian communists, they could say what they want. I personally wouldn't say it, and I don't encourage anyone to say that. It's just, why are they making it seem like this is somehow fascist? Why are they somehow making it seem like it's somehow fascist, right? So, German fascism is acting as the spearhead of international counter-revolution, the chief instigator of imperialist war, and the initiator of a crusade against the Soviet Union, the great fatherland of the working people of the whole world. Now, who is the chief instigator of war in America right now, of imperialist war? Who is the chief instigator? Well, I can name two people. It used to be the neocons. Now it's the progressives. I repeat that. The self-proclaimed progressives in the United States of America, even more than Biden, are the chief instigators of imperialist war against Russia, against China over Taiwan, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Who are the most solid anti-war people? It seems like the most solid anti-war contingent among the American public right now are populists across the board. It goes from the MAGA people to us. Now, what we're trying to do is they're anti-war with regard to Russia, but there are elements from the top, specifically the Teal Bannon contingent, and if I'm mischaracterizing them, they can defend themselves, and I'll be open to that. But it seems like they kind of want to push for war with China using a populist veneer, and we're trying to fight back against that. It is, that's what we're focusing on, is fighting back against the false populist pro-war agenda. But they're nowhere at the level of progressives who actually have an ideological basis for a crusade. A literal crusade is what Dimitrov said. against Russia and China for ideological reasons. We have to spread democracy. We have to spread LGBT rights. We have to spread the Dalai Lama and free Tibet. We have to spread land back. That's what these fucking people are. They're fascists, right? Fascism is not... So, I want you guys to listen to this as well. Fascism is not a form of state power standing above classes. It's not a revolt of the petty bourgeoisie. So it's not the revolt of, the boaters who are barbecuing. Fascism is not a power standing above class nor government of the petty bourgeoisie or the lumpen over finance capital. Fascism is the power of finance capital itself. Dimitrov made that crystal clear. It's not the power of industrial capital, which is what Trump overwhelmingly represented. It is the power of finance capital. Okay? Now, if that somehow changed, you're going to have to explain to me why that changed. It is the organization of terrorist vengeance against the working class and the revolutionary section of the peasantry and intelligentsia. Oh, boy, that sounds a lot like Antifa to me. Terrorist vengeance against the working class. And foreign policy, it's jingoism in its most brutal form, fomenting bestial hatred of other nations. What kind of attitude have progressives fomented in regards to the attitude toward Russia and China? Have you guys seen some of these tweets about Russia? Did you see the tweet about Russia where they said, Russia has always been the bloody state of Muscovy. We must crush the horde. You guys see that shit? Did you see the shit that they're saying about China? You're going to tell me that isn't jingoism in its most brutal form and fomenting bestial hatred against other nations? I mean, it's clear as day. That's exactly what it fucking is to me. It's absolutely clear to me. The true character of fascism must be particularly stressed because in a number of countries, under the cover of social demagoguery, fascism is meant to gain a following of the mass of the petty bourgeoisie that has been dislocated by crisis and even sections of the backward strata of the proletariat. But these would have never supported fascism if they understood their real character and true nature. So that might happen in this country if, for example, these Azovite Nazlibs start presenting their agenda in this populist veneer against China. That could get, the masses on board with their agenda. Right now, they're viciously engaged in a civil war against the masses, but they might use China to make it, to spread it to the masses themselves. That's where our role comes in, to fight against that as much as we can, to prevent that as much as we can, to push back against that as much as we can, to do our best, right? That's what we're here for, to do our best to fight that and combat that. Right? Now, in other countries where the ruling bourgeoisies... So look at this. In case people think I'm fear-mongering in regards to Biden and I'm fear-mongering, in regards to... fear-mongering in regards to, the situation in America right now. In other countries where the ruling bourgeoisie fears an early outbreak, fascism establishes its unrestricted political monopoly, either immediately or by intensifying its reign of terror against all rival parties and groups. What about those domestic terror laws? It does not prevent fascism, when its position becomes particularly acute, from trying to extend its bases and without altering its class nature, trying to combine open terrorist dictatorship with a crude sham of parliamentarism. So that's what happens in Ukraine, right? You have an open terrorist dictatorship of the Azovites, but you still have a crude sham of parliamentarism. I mean, do you really think things in Ukraine are decided by Zelensky or by parliament? No! It's decided by the Azov thugs and militias, who have all of the... they've won the master-slave dialectic in Ukraine. They're the people who are willing to fight for something and willing to die for something. Therefore, they control Ukraine. The Ukrainian military just gets its orders from the political state. They're not going to fight and die for an ideology or a cause like the Azovites are. So it's that quote-unquote national guard that has power in Ukraine. The ascension to power of fascism is not an ordinary succession of one bourgeois government to another, but a substitution of one state form of class domination of the bourgeoisie, from bourgeois democracy to open terrorist dictatorship. That's what we're facing here in this country. I mean, being advanced, aided, and abetted by the left, who are fighting the info wars, the rank and file, for them. Now, I'm going to talk about MK Ultra and the LGBT movement only for one reason. Okay, it seems like even before I said a goddamn thing about LGBT movement, even before I said a goddamn thing about it, right? Even before I said anything critical about that movement, it seems like the most active vanguard, people who are willing to, for free, fight the info war against me and to destroy the anti-imperialist message, were somehow people brainwashed into thinking that if they didn't oppose me, they could not sustain or protect their sexual identity. So they attached their sexual identity with loyalty to the imperialist state. If that's not a form of MK Ultra, I don't fucking know what is. Somehow, the American state has gotten people to attach their very sexuality with loyalty to the agenda of imperialism. That's pretty fucking scary. And if you think that's just a coincidence, I think you're naive. I think there's a reason why that is. That is, you know, you look into the history of MK Ultra and the shit that they've gotten these free and willing soldiers of the imperialist state who have attached their own sexuality. I repeat, they've attached their own sexuality to the imperialist state, meaning they are going to go so, like, put it this way. It's almost like, you know, if you're an honorable person, you're a man, for example, you're going to be like, this is my very manhood is on the line. I have to defend this, right? It's kind of like that for them. Their very sexual truth is on the line. If they don't oppose Haas and attack Haas, they'll be whatever. So they've been brainwashed in some kind of way to become the slaves of the imperialist deep state's agenda, and it is absolutely fucking horrific. It's a horror story, right? But these are the most. I mean, you look at the people who are in my replies, and you look at the people who are the most fanatical about opposing me. It just kind of seems like there's a common denominator, you know. And that's not a bigoted thing to say, because I'm saying they've somehow been brainwashed into thinking. Even before, look, everything I'm saying is defensive. I never used to really have these views when I first started out with infrared. I kind of more had the view that, you know, it's kind of an index of progress to be for the LGBT movement to make strides. And that was kind of my view before. And then when I started to realize that the LGBT movement was starting to attack me for being pro-China and defending Russia and being a quote-unquote tanky, I started to realize, I was like, maybe my attitude toward the LGBT movement should change, because clearly it's more than just people being free to express themselves in some kind of way. It seems like there's a lot more to it than that. Which, again, you have to point out that MK Ultra connection, and it becomes pretty fucking clear that we're dealing with a lot more. We are definitely not in Kansas anymore, right? But what, I mean, that, you guys also notice that's all they have? The only other thing they could really say is abortion, maybe. That I'm not as pro-abortion as everyone else. But why would it even be my place to be? Because I'm not even a fucking woman, so who cares? They never say I'm racist. They never take it from a racial perspective because they can't, because I'm a fucking Lebanese man and our community is extremely non-white. They never say I'm fascist because I'm racist. It's always about the LGBT movement. It's always about that. And then the second biggest thing is that they try to say I'm a misogynist. And I don't know why they say that. Why do they say that? Because I'm unapologetically a man. Because I don't apologize for being a man. Look, if I wanted to apologize for being a man, I just wouldn't be a man anymore. Either be a man or be a woman. I don't know what else to fucking tell you. Be a man or be a woman. Is that a reactionary message? If you don't be apologetically anything. Be who you are unapologetic. Is that fascist? Is that fascist somehow? I feel like that's living like a human being, a dignified human being. You know? Thank you, Warvo. Appreciate you.
Hitler would have watched anime.
Yeah. True. Very true. Thank you, 50.
A lot of us in your Discord used to be leftists. Disillusioned with their incoherent and often contradictory ideology, we recognize your authenticity.
I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. There are some things I want to show you guys. There are things I want to show you guys today. Check this out. Our predictions are increasingly becoming true. And, you know, it brings me no pleasure to say that, although it actually does bring me a lot of pleasure to say it. Because I like being right? But look at this, the Spectator.uk. Meghan Markle's presidential run appears inevitable. Don't take it from me, take it from the Spectator, okay? Now, when did I predict this, guys? I predicted this like a year ago, right? Meghan Markle has starred in a Netflix show and married into the royal family, but she got her eyes on even loftier ambitions. Basically, this article is going to quote what Biden's wife said, which is that, of course, she's going to run in the future. So under such scenario, the appeal of a starry glamorous figure willing to stand. Now, it's not inevitable that it's going to be 2024, but it's very probable that it's going to happen sometime. Now, it might not be 2024, but is it going to be 2028? Is it going to be some other time? I think it's very probable, right? Owens is not alone in thinking that the Duchess would have an excellent chance of winning the nomination and perhaps even the presidency. President Markle, the word will send a chill down the spine of those like me who are skeptical of Markle's ladder climbing. Well, if only you knew that this was planned years and years in advance. Do we really want Meghan leading the free world? And how would Meghan handle the negative publicity that would follow? They're planning for it. They have a way. They know what they're doing, right? They know what they're fucking doing. Guys, I used to be a guy who had a lot of dreams and premonitions in my life. Just a lot of weird dreams and floating around. And then I had one dream, and it was the CPUSA 2036 dream. And then suddenly, all the other dreams disappeared. Although there was stuff going on there too, I think. And then this one became real, I think, right? And now I'm pursuing this one, and it's a dream in the sense of like, I'm fighting for this vision, for this dream. Like, I just feel like it's true. I mean, how do you know it's true? I don't know. I just feel like it. I just feel like it's a real thing. I just feel like it, okay? I can't prove it in any way. I can't justify it. Really, all I could do is tell you, I've been reading a book about a guy, an Islamic Sufi saint from medieval Iran, who used to be just this guy who like had dreams and he would just tell people, and it would turn out to be correct. And he never really like explained to people his secret. He just like would be like, yeah. So that's kind of how it is for me. It's like I don't really want to explain it to anyone. I just obey me and listen to me like a cult. You know, just everything I say, you should just take it at completely uncritically because I just feel like it, right? I'm just kidding, but no, I think there is a reason for the CPUSA 2036 vision, and it has more to do with the coherence of an aesthetic with the turning of an era, right? And it's just it's a coherent. The reason why things are coming together like this isn't because I have supernatural powers. I've been able to anticipate these things more so because they make sense for this new era that's arriving, right? It's something that would make sense, right? And it's like a hyperstition, right? As the CCRU guys used to talk about that, which means how do I explain that? How do I fucking explain that? I feel like in a way, the things that bubble up into the surface of our heads are the things that have deep historical roots. And it's not just as Freud said that when we have dreams, it's our own personal sexuality and unconscious coming to the surface. It's also all of history, right? It's also the historical era we're living in and we're entering into. It's like it finds a way to make itself intelligible to us for it to make sense at that level, right? But yeah, I got this completely right. And this will always be my biggest. This is the scariest prediction I ever made. Sometimes I feel like God is going to intervene and make this not happen, just to like make the point that yo Haas, you can't fucking predict the future. Fuck you. You don't know what the future is gonna be. Only God does, and which is true. Which is true. I feel like just to like prove that point. Because wouldn't it be too much, like if this came true, wouldn't it be too like dangerous? Like I'm just a human being. I would literally be referred as like some kind of supernatural. I'd be like a Dr. Manhattan divine figure that everyone would start worshiping or some shit, right? And I would get too cocky. So maybe God is gonna make this not happen. Because I was just, there's a possibility I'm gonna get too cocky about it. But you know what? I'm not going to get cocky. I don't want to get cocky about this. I'm going to be a sage, and I'm just going to trust the plan. Just going to trust this belief, trust this plan. I'm not going to get cocky, right? I think that's what I'll say. Check this out. Apparently, this was like a MAGA guy who posted this. Allies link up during the Battle of DC. They're posting a fictional. Wow! This is a MAGA guy. This is a conservative. So you're going to tell us that our ideology will never gain traction in America? I think you're making too many assumptions. I think you're assuming that the ideologies that exist for their own reasons rather than the fact that they reflect, certain material yada 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 realities, right? So that's really interesting. That is definitely really interesting, right? Let me tell you guys the truth. Let me give you the pro tip. Okay? Pro tip. Every single ideology has a signifier, a master signifier at the center of it. The rest is just pageantry, right? You have to give form to that master signifier through communism. Communism means 1776, liberty, and all those things. It's all of that. It's just on a new plane, right? So it's not even so much that you're competing with that for the working class. You're giving sense to the working class's spontaneous ideological orientation by giving expression to its master signifier, which right now is empty and floating and ambiguous, right? It doesn't really have one. Every time it somehow becomes concrete, it becomes a schizo conspiracy theory or some kind of degenerate thing, and then it never gains traction. The MAGA movement is a floating signifier. It's just you have to make sense of it in the right way, right? So I think that's how I justify it. I think someone clipped this so I remember it, because I always forget to remind myself of this. Every ideology has a signifier, okay? So when we're adopting the MAGA stuff and the libertarian stuff, we're trying to give expression to what that ultimately means, which is ambiguous, okay? Because clearly working class people are adopting it because it makes sense to them in some kind of way, not because they're loyal to some abstract ideological precepts or some abstract ideological form. I think that's a pretty simple thing, right? People don't adopt ideologies because they're loyal to some formal ideological precept, some axiomatic precept. That's like how nerds think, right? Who are trying to live their life according to consistent precepts. But in terms of the average person, they're just adopting it because it makes sense of their life in some kind of way. So if MAGA is making sense of their life in this fundamental way, you know, you've got to ask the question, why? And do you run into this space of nihilism when you say, oh, all that was a lie? I don't know, right? Was MAGA all one big sham? I honestly don't know. I don't know. Is MAGA all going to be, does it have to be experienced as one big sham? Or is there going to be some continuity with that? In the same way that there's continuity with other previous forms of populism, you know? I kind of lean more on the idea that there's going to be continuity. There's something about MAGA which is a floating signifier and which is irreversible. You know, I don't think it's inherently fascist. But it's not. I mean, fuck. That's a given. It's not inherently fascist. I don't think it's inherently about Trump forever. It's just what it represents, you know? My biggest lesson, I mean, my biggest piece of advice for leftists is always don't knock on an open door. It's not always set in stone. Or it's most of the time, it's not set in stone. It's not set in stone 99% of the time. So don't knock on an open door. Sometimes these things are open doors. Most of the time they are. Unless it's see, for example, the Zoltanius guy, is that an open door? No, because he's an intellectual. So intellectuals will never be open doors because they're dogmatic and they believe things based on thoughts, not everyday intuitive realities. So those intellectual nerds, you're never going to win them over because it's not based on intuition for them. But for the average person, that's an open door. Their ideology is an open door. You just have to make sense of it in the right way. Whether it's MAGA or whether it's something else, you got to make sense of it in the right way because it's an open door. It's not based on some intellectually contrived precept, right? Like that fucking Zoltanius guy or those guys, you know? Um, anyway. Anyway. Um, some lesser stuff, but we have some shit from Luna Oi. How often do you have to say this shit in schools? You pledge allegiance to a fucking flag? Doesn't this sound and look like what some, like, MTV shitlib would fucking say? Doesn't this sound exactly like what some MTV shitlib... Is there any mods in the chat? Are there any fucking mods in this fucking chat or no? Yeah. This is exactly what, like, some, like, cynical shitlib cosmopolitan would say. You pledge allegiance to a fucking flag? That is unreal. Oh my OMG. That is unreal. Except, that's what they do in Vietnam. They do that already in Vietnam. Okay? Plus, you know, Caleb's going to point it out. The Pledge of Allegiance was written by the socialist Francis Bellamy. And the words were taken from various oaths former Confederates had to take in order to get their voting rights back. So it was a repudiation of slavery. But, you pledge allegiance to a fucking flag? OMG, I'm so cool. I'm so cool. I'm so cool. I got a message. Haas, you're an interesting guy. I agree with a lot of your stance on the trans people as a trans Marxist myself. But you make good points, they will give you credit. Peace and solidarity, disagreements aside. Well, I don't know what you mean by trans, but like I'm not against trans people. I'm not against trans, okay? I respect people. I'm just against the fucking neopronoun shit where they say there's 80 genders. I just think there's, you know, I think there's man and woman. And if you're a transgender, you're also either, you know, one of the two, right? So that's just my stance. I'm not against trans people. I don't know why people think that. I'm not God. I'm not God. I don't pretend to be God. I think only God knows what we are, right? Only God knows the truth. So whether the TERFs are correct or whether the trans people are, only God knows, right? So in the meantime, let's just respect each other, right? And, you know, as far as the questions about prisons and all that shit is concerned, it's like, you know, the one thing I'm like uncompromising on is leave the children out of it. That's for God's sake, that's my most solid thing is leave the children out of it. Also, I do agree with when, you know, you got to also prioritize the majority of women, not the exception, when it comes to what gets put to the front and center of, like, you know, how to define a woman's movement. You know, what issues should you prioritize? You got to define it by the majority, not the exception. You know. But anyway, Jamie Dimon says there's a hurricane coming for the U.S. economy and that you better brace yourself. So you don't know who Jamie Dimon is. This is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase and Company. So if he says there's a hurricane coming for the U.S. economy, I'm pretty sure there's a fucking hurricane coming for the U.S. I mean, we all knew this was going to happen, but like, the Fed actions, war in Europe, create unprecedented challenge. Still too soon to say. Guys, oh my god. I can't believe it. Remember when I fucking literally predicted this? Remember when I literally predicted this? Jamie Dimon warned investors to prepare for an economic hurricane as the economy struggles against an unprecedented combination of challenges, including tightening monetary policy and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And by the way, we know this is an excuse. We know it was going to happen either way. We all saw the economic hurricane coming, but they're using Russia's invasion of Ukraine as like, yeah, sure, this was probably an accelerator, but we all knew it was coming anyway, right? I talked about this. Remember I talked about how they're coming for the food next? Remember how I talked about the next thing is it's going to be about food? It is. So everybody should really, really prepare for that. For real, really. Everyone should really prepare for that. No joke. No joke. It is not a joke. Not a, not anything to, fool around about. Dimon said at JP Morgan's Investor Day in May that there were storm clouds looming over the U.S. economy. But he said he's updated his forecast given the challenges faced by the Federal Reserve as it attempts to rein in inflation. Right now, it's kind of sunny. Things are doing fine. Everyone thinks the Fed can handle it, which means it can't handle it. Shares of the company dropped 1.8% to $129.81 at 11:21 a.m. in New York. Now, when Biden says he really can't do shit about inflation, there's also something I want to show you guys to push back on that, because it's funny. So Biden says there's nothing we can do about inflation, right? So here's Richard Nixon, executive order, yada, yada, yada. They're going to stabilize the economy. They're going to stabilize prices, rents, wages, and salaries. They're going to have price controls. They're going to have rent controls. Unthinkable today, right? Isn't that unthinkable today? Like, this is such an archaic form of economic intervention. Well, it worked. Stabilize them. The authority vested in you by the Constitution and the statutes of the United States, including the Economic Stabilization Act of 1970, which allows the executive to do this. So Nixon knew how to do this, deal with this issue. Look what Biden said. There's nothing he can do to bring down gas or food prices in the near term. Nothing he can do. He's totally powerless. What a strong president. Guys, remember when we were told that it's going to be harm reduction if we vote for Biden? I'm pretty sure that it was more harm caused by Biden, right? Yeah, I know today's situation is different. It's just the lack of the ability to act between Nixon and Biden is pretty fucking hilarious. Maybe Biden should not do the same thing, but there's definitely things he could do. I mean, why couldn't he stabilize prices, right? Why not? Why couldn't he do that? Yo, I just thought this was funny. So this guy's quote tweeting me. He's like, has the more brain dead take than usual. Felipe has the flag of a right-wing Catholic country. This is the flag of a Catholic country. Yo. And, you know, if Twitter was full of smart people, this guy would get like a billion ratioed and like he would get clowned on. There would be like an account called Dumbass Anarchist Moments. It would get like 20,000 likes. But Twitter is genuinely a place of stupid people, stupid and illiterate people. Nobody's going to push back on this dumb fuck saying Russia's a Catholic country. That's the type of shit we deal with, right? But was the USSR anti-racist? Spoiler, no. And they're basically like going over the deportations that happened during World War II as evidence that Russia was not anti-racist, which is funny in consideration of the fact, you know, that has nothing to do with racism. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Apparently, Alex Jones went on Blair White's show. You guys want to watch that? You guys want to do some react or no? You want original content? Because I kind of want to watch that. What do you guys think? One's if you want to see Alex Jones on Blair White. Two's if you don't. Yeah, I think most people want to see it. Let's check it out.
Alex Jones, round 2.
It is great to be here. I had a really good time last week, but you were nice to reshoot this. I passed out on air with you, so but yeah, that's really all it is.
Here's the thing that I get, maybe conflicted is a strong word, but I'm noticing this thing with you where I've met so many people who have, you know, a public persona, media profiles, and they have a very good image. They're very much protected by the regime. They're very much protected by the corporate press, and they can do no wrong in the eyes of the mainstream media, right? And then you meet them in real life, and you're like, oh, that's a demon. That's maybe not literally. I don't believe in literal demons, but that's a bad person. And their image doesn't match with like their good public persona. And for you, it's flipped. You have this like persona.
How Alex feels about Trump. This is the stuff we want to see, right? We don't want to really see like the personal stuff. We want to see the stuff that's substantive, right?
I think that, and you can tell me how you feel about this, but I think that I'm done with Trump. I think his time is gone. I think we need new blood, new energy. I want DeSantis, but the thing about Trump that I will say,
this
is I think the best thing about
this is a big con. So they all talk about DeSantis. DeSantis is a swamp monster. He's a neocon, and they're all doing this because of his stance on COVID, which was a big con game. DeSantis, no. DeSantis is a warmonger. Okay? Gotta draw the line here and say no to DeSantis.
his presidency, because I think he did a lot of fucking things wrong. But the best thing is we walked away with a very...
Where's Alex Jones and Mike Tyson? Is that recent? Because I want to watch the recent stuff. No, yeah, that's old. That's way too old.
Deserved contempt for the corporate press that he kind of gifted to us. Like, here is the breaking down of the walls. You can see who they really are.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Trump did thousands of good things.
Yeah.
It's just his pushing of the experimental injections, his...
Holy shit, can you fucking say this on YouTube? Can you say this shit on YouTube even? Are you even allowed to say that on YouTube? How the fuck does she even have that on YouTube? What the fuck?
Some of the pardons he did were really terrible. Him allowing censorship to happen and only paying lip service are the negatives. But when it comes to saying, hey, the corporate press is the enemy of the people, and calling them out was just beautiful. And I think when he was doing that, he did the best of anybody. And so I think we owe Trump a debt of gratitude. I mean, he went from being worth like $12 billion, like $3 billion while he was president. He got sued thousands of times. He got massively persecuted. And so when I criticize Trump, it's just so I can point out the things he did that I don't agree with. But overall, I give the guy, an A plus. And I agree that
An A plus, come on, that's a little, what about a B? I think a B is fair, okay? And honestly, I'm getting C territory, right? But an A plus, I can't agree with that. I really disagree with that. I think, his foreign policy being bullied by the neocons, his economic policy being weak. No way he's an A plus. Okay, he wasn't perfect. A plus is perfect.
75, 76, whatever it is. He's like Biden. His time is come and gone. I think DeSantis
now,
is
Biden's a F, right? But Trump is not an A plus. Okay,
amazing. I really like DeSantis. I wish
even Stalin wasn't an A plus according to Mao. Stalin was more like an A minus for Mao, right?
A lot like Tulsi Gabbard would be a great president. We see real. I don't agree with everything she says, but yeah.
Wow. Now, I'm not a big Tulsi fan, but it's so cool that Alex Jones said that. So cool he said that.
I think compared to for other Democrats, she's the best there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just saying.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
I like authentic people. Even if I disagree with some of the things they say or do, at the end of the day, you can tell they're running their own show. And I think
that's what it is. I have the same view. You're running your own show, I like you. If you're not running your own show, I don't like you. That's why I support libertarians. That's why, because they know that they're running their own show. That's literally such a good way of putting it.
They mean well. And I think DeSantis would be the best president for us in 2 years.
I think.
No. Nope, that guy is not running his own show.
He's kind of showing that, in my opinion, traditionally, like, I've voted Republican my entire adult life, but I think that Republicans generally, especially politicians, are quite weak. I think they're afraid to counterpunch. I think they let the left run amok.
Well, that's it. Republicans on average are like 75 years old, and they are scared of the corporate media. They don't get it's good to be attacked by it. And they've got the platform. So, yeah, they just are a bunch of old lawyers that are knock-kneed and just conformists, and they're horrible.
Well, that was one of Trump's pitfalls, was he came from the Hollywood scene and, New York, but the entertainment industry. And I think that he was, to an extent, enamored with being liked by them, still being in that group, that he didn't push back as hard as
the DeSantis con game I'm sad to say it's becoming very successful. And I think it's dangerous because he's a war hawk. He's going to be pushing. The only way you can know if someone's running their own show is if they're not having a pro-war agenda. That's really the truth.
Could have. Whereas DeSantis, I feel like he pulls no fucking punches. I think that he enacts a lot of policy that a lot of people are like, oh, did he really do that? It's like, well, he should have done that.
DeSantis you want to be attacked by the system. You don't want to be loved by it. He understands that it's like rotten milk. Its expiration date is over. And that.
Okay. I don't ever see any. The only people I ever see talk about goddamn DeSantis are conservatives. I don't ever see the establishment go after this. I'm sure they do, but I don't ever see him trending on Twitter. I don't ever see any shit about DeSantis. He's not a guy who's being attacked by the system like Trump was,
That's the thing. Netflix is plunging. Hollywood's dead. Nothing can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So they can try to demonize Alex Jones and shut him down and set the precedent for everybody else. They can try to do all this stuff. It's not going to work. They're done.
Well, I think, and I had this kind of realization, and tell me if you agree, that I think that because I grew up in California and I had to escape LA because of the lockdowns and the COVID and shit, I kind of was under this spell that I thought like, oh, Democrat politicians are the enemy, they're evil, they're the worst. And then I said, well, let me look above that. Let me go past that. Because yeah, Newsom enacted a lot of crazy shit in California that affected my quality of life, everyone I knew. But you think that, or I kind of realized that the corporate press is actually the puppeteer and the politicians are the puppets. It's really the corporate press that holds these Democratic politicians to enacting things that are immoral, like lockdowns and enforced vaccines.
Exactly.
And
It's the UN and the corporate media and the World Economic Forum and the corporations 2 years ago, 26 months ago, that demanded lockdowns and demanded this, and the media just got in lockstep. And so instead of just worrying about the Democrats.
Yeah, but Alex, who's promoting war against China? Those same people. So you can't really say you're running your own show as a politician. I'm not saying you, but DeSantis, if you're also pushing that agenda. Why would we want to go to war with China? You know,
Democrats, we've got to look at the Davos group and the Bilderberg group and the powerful corporate interests that are in control. You're absolutely right. Corporate global governance is the threat.
yeah, it's not enough to just look
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
at Newsom or any of these other Dem governors. It's like, that's kind of only seeing 10% of the problem because they're held hostage just as much as anyone else. You said that DeSantis is able to, allow himself to act without caring about being hated by the press, but the Democratic governors really care about that, and so they're really held hostage because if Newsom didn't lock down California, he'd be smeared in the press. They wouldn't let him not do that. So you have to look above that.
Well, absolutely. These people are puppets. Anybody that tries to be a real leader, whether they be male or female, it doesn't matter. The system is going to undermine them and attack them because the special interests want to control everybody.
Yeah, 100%.
That's why people have got to value free speech like America always did previously. Whether you agree with it or not, it really is valuable to do it because that's what holds the establishment in check. And just to see liberals now, they're pro-war, they're pro-torture,
Yeah.
they're pro-censorship, they're pro-surveillance.
Yeah.
Ayn Rand libertarians are indoctrinated. The Koch brothers invested in the long game, making believers of corporate sellouts instead of bribery.
Yeah. But you got to know it's not just the Koch. The Koch brothers are nowhere as big as Soros. You got to remember that. It's just that there's the neocons, right? These fake conservatives who are bought out. These warmongers. No one's going to be independently in favor of war. No one's going to independently be in favor of that. You got to ask the question, why are they so in favor of that,
Surveillance, because they're not really liberals. They're just corporate mouthpieces. And because they don't get censored on
And thank you, by the way.
social media, that's just a form of counterfeit money. Because they're given that potential to then be spread and heard, they have basically sold out for just a few pieces of silver.
Yeah, and then you think about sort of the reason why so much shit goes unchecked now, not even just with the government, but just so many crazy ideologies that run amok, and you think like 90% of the reason this crazy shit's happening is because people are so fucking terrified to speak out against it. Like living in California, it's very different here in Texas, and I'm so happy here, but living in California, it's like no one had a voice because they were so terrified of being fired. They're so terrified of losing their livelihood, and it's like, I feel like so much of the crazy shit, I think of like, I don't know, kids going on.
Is there a reason the super chat by Goomba is not going through? Because I've just been waiting for the alert to go through. It's just, I don't know. Goomba, thank you for the 5. I worked for DeSantis, but left and became a communist. I don't get why these people coalesce around him. J.D. Vance and the Teal faction seem better. They seem better than DeSantis. You're right about that, but they're still not the Oliver Stone people. That's what I've been told are the best people.
Puberty blockers and getting surgeries. It's like the average person you talk to, if there's not a camera in front of them, if there's not their employer near them, they're going to say, oh, that's really fucked up. That's really wrong. But if they think anyone but you's listening, they can't say that.
Exactly. It's an orthodoxy. And like getting back to that, whenever I was here last week, and I think you're going to air some excerpts later, but I was kind of out of it at the end. A lot of people were commenting online. I saw it like, well, wait a minute. He hates people that are trans or whatever, but then he's here being a hypocrite. And no, I've never been a hypocrite. I'm not against any adults with whatever they want to do. I'm a libertarian when it comes to that. I've never changed that view. You've been listening for a long time. You know that. What I don't like is
Super based.
Based.
Thank you.
I'd if everyone is aware, but Blair is trans, FYI.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of had Alex Jones's view on this.
whether it's homosexual, heterosexual, whatever it is, whatever the alphabet soup name is, children need to be left alone. And
that's exactly my view. I have the same view as him. It's exactly my view.
Innocent. And if a dude walked up and started trying to tell my kids at the park, 5 and 6 year olds, about sex, you call the police. But what is the school doing it? Leave people alone and let them do what they want as adults, and then let them make their own decisions. That's what freedom's all about. So I've never been hypocritical, and I've never been a fraud about that. I think you're a really nice person, really smart, neat person. I like you a lot. So he was a friend. So to me, it doesn't matter. It's individuals and what they want to do in their own lives.
They call me the same shit. It's like, so it's funny that you mentioned they're calling you a hypocrite. I thought when you first started that sentence, you were going to say people were calling me that because I saw that about me. It's like, how could you sit there and talk with him or hang out with him? Which, first of all, this isn't the first time we've been on camera together. This is like the second or third. But second of all, how are you going to tell me behind a screen how he feels when I've been in a room with him? That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Well, but that's what's happening is, you were on my show like 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I thought you're a really smart person.
You were my first interview ever.
So
you know what's funny about this shit? I really feel like people like this do promote trans normalization and acceptance among the masses. You know what I mean? Since the masses gained your trust, they're kind of like, you know what? Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm tolerant of it. And I feel like people being persecuted in conservative households for being trans, I feel like she does them a big favor, right? It's like, oh, it can be normal, you know? It can be like that Blair White, whatever. I don't know. It's my view. It's my 2 cents. Don't you think that like leftists do the opposite when they associate being trans with like destroying all norms and shit? You know what I mean? I don't know. Just my view. This is my view. I'm not even saying if normalization is good or not. I'm just saying if you claim that you're for trans rights and all this shit, Blair White should be your favorite person, right?
So I was lucky you came on my show. You're a really smart, neat person. And so it's just not real. And so I'm not one way for one audience and one way for another. It's all completely there. I don't hate anybody. I'm not a hypocrite. And I'm not sitting there putting people down. You're not hurting anybody.
It's more convenient for us to hate each other. Let's just be real. It keeps things the way that it is, and it keeps this crazy divide by making it more convenient for me to sit here and think that you're going to have a grudge against me or that you're not going to like me.
Yeah, but I don't just not dislike you. I like you.
Exactly.
And I like the crew out here and all these cool people. I mean, it's just stupid. And what I'm saying is it shouldn't be a political agenda what people do in their personal lives or their identities or who they are. And there is one thing about humans: we change our environment and we change who we are, and it is a fact.
I do not know why Goomba's super chats don't go through. That is so weird. By the way, everybody liked the fucking stream. 800 votes, but there's only like 500 likes. What the fuck is that? Like the stream right now, you fucking lazy fucks. Holy shit. But Goomba, DeSantis, thanks for that. He gets favored from cracking down on woke companies like the Tampa Bay Rays. Denies them funding. Also look up DeSantis, Florida State Guard. Yeah, but you gotta understand, like, you gotta understand, imperialism is the primary contradiction, right? And it's a vigilante militia. That's what Democrats are calling it. It's just a state guard, right? That's all it is a state guard. I don't know why your super chats don't go through. So is DeSantis censored by Streamlabs? Maybe they're right. What the fuck? I do not know why they don't go through.
We are controlling our evolution. But the globalists then
I'm tired of being pressured to like the stream. The laziest chat of all time. It's literally so lazy. 888 votes, but only 600 likes? What the hell? What the hell is that?
hijack that great truth and say, that's right, and we're going to control the evolution, and we're going to be in the driver's seat, and that should not be done.
Well, so you mentioned, and we'll talk about how last time we were a little out of it, but I want you to go more in depth this time about how I asked you how you felt about the kids in the hormone blockers and the surgeries, and you said that it was a
I want to do that. Can we take a 5-second break?
Yes.
All right. That water you had was so good, and I stole it. And I'm going to be good this week, okay?
We need a little more water.
Does that mess you up?
No, you're
Right.
fine.
I can go as long as you want to.
Yeah. Just get him the tequila. Is that water or what is that?
I don't want to steal yours.
No. What is it though?
It's tequila.
Oh, okay, good. We're good then.
I'm totally awake. My daughter was sick. I was just out of it. You doing good?
We're good.
I'm going to try to get out of this and see if we can go eat. So
Yeah, we should go out to eat.
we should. Let's just sit this.
Based.
Yeah, you're good.
Fuck it.
Thanks for the super chat, Goomba Sauce.
There you go. Thanks, Sean.
Based.
Justice for Goomba.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. The super chats. Thanks, EJ.
I'm gonna have a sip of this too.
That's yours. I
Yeah.
stole yours.
So
Let's start over. But I mean, here's the deal. Start your question over. I apologize.
yeah, you're good. So one of the things we started to get into last time was I asked you about the kids and the trans shit, and it's interesting because like we agree on that shit. I don't think any child should be having their puberty block surgeries that are irreversible, etc. I think that's something that you decide to do as an adult of your own volition and whatever. But you mentioned, and I want you to get more into it and tell me a little more because I'm fascinated by it. You said that it was a depopulation scheme, and that, or at least part of it was that.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean because somebody feels a way or is a way that they're bad. And it is a chemical fact that in a zygote or whatever,
Oh, is he out of frame?
I apologize.
You're good. You're good.
I apologize. Third time's the charm.
Take 3. Okay. Should I start over the whole question? All right. Third time's the charm, Alex.
Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things we got into last time, and I want you to go more in depth this time because I thought it was interesting, but we were both going through it last time, is we mentioned the trans kid thing, and we mentioned hormone blockers, surgery, and what the larger agenda, the
Let's talk about the human-animal hybrids.
human-animal hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know much about that. That just sounds like some crazy shit, not in a bad way. It just sounds like nuts. Can you just give me the for dummies version of what's happening there?
Growing human organs is obviously going to be one of the biggest industries ever.
Yeah.
And it's hard to create artificial wombs to do that. Also, if something's 100% human, it's got rights. And if something's an animal, it's even got rights. But if it's a new species, an alien, which means never been on the earth before, part human, part animal, now that human-animal hybrid doesn't have rights. And so you can gestate it usually in a cow, but they grow other animal-human hybrids, pig human hybrids, you name it, inside cows. Those cows are generally being given anti-rejection drugs, or themselves are part human, so that they can then not reject the humanoid they're growing up inside of it. And I remember 25 years ago seeing like MIT reports on it, and then even 5 years ago they had articles. Human-animal hybrids are gestating or in utero on farms across the U.S. That's a real headline. And it just admits there's thousands of these clones. And I've talked to some people that have worked in biomedical areas that have been involved in it, including University of Texas. And one time I was actually given a little tour, and I was off records. I can't get into all of it, but I was able to see some of these.
Oh my God.
Over CCTV at a facility out in Bastrop from UT downtown. I was able to look at it. It was a DARPA program. That was about 23 years ago. And these were human-animal apes that they're using for medical experiments. And they admit that's going on. It's in the National Academy of Sciences and in the NIH and all that's going on. And so, but here's the deal. I'm talking about it. It's like I'm talking about Mars because it sounds crazy. But,
I don't think it actually sounds that fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. I think it sounds out of what we'd think would be acceptable, but then you look throughout history.
Well, that's it. It's all segregated away where you don't see it.
Yeah, you think of so many experiments throughout history. You think of so many surgeries that we have now that we deem as...
All right. Yo, we laugh at him, but what if you saw one of these fucking... What if you saw like a fucking cow? A cow man? What if you like went into a government laboratory and you snuck in and there's just this dude sitting in an office who's a cow man? What would you do? I don't know. It'd be pretty scary.
Important in a routine that were born out of the Nazi experiments. And you think of, so much crazy shit that goes on. It's not actually that unbelievable. It's wild, but it's not that unbelievable.
Exactly. And what's frustrating to me is 99% of what I cover is open source and not debatable. And then they'll just lie and say I'm making it up. But, I mean, that's really going on. I mean, in the last week, they had the Washington Post, the New York Times, Bloomberg, the Financial Times of London all say it's time to have dictators. Freedom isn't good. It's time to censor.
No fucking... Yeah, I think I've seen shit like that.
It's time to be in a tyranny. These are headlines saying this, that it's time to have a dictator. This is what the Davos group...
Shocked. Why don't I get to fucking... Damn. They are saying that shit, though. They do say that shit all the time.
Group and the globalists are selling.
They do say that shit all the fucking time. They're like, democracy's overrated. Let's have a dictator. And they present it as like a TED Talk. They present it as like a fucking TED Talk,
Yeah. I just have another question about the animal hybrids. What level of... This is
why I don't like her. I'm sorry, I don't really like her. He's talking about like important shit and she's like, I'm just talking about the meme now. Who gives a fuck about the meme?
Almost my morbid curiosity. I'm going to a dark place right now. What level of consciousness did they have that they are an experiment? Did they have like animal intelligence? Did they have human intelligence? Somewhere in between? Do you even know? How much can you say?
Well, if you know how mad scientists work, and if you look at the spirit of evil that runs things, it's mad.
I'm clocking out soon. This is also off topic and random, but do you any tips on how to study Hegel?
Fucking poggers, dude. Damn. We got a kingmaker in the chat. Got a elite benefactor of the stream. But any tips on how to study Hegel? Yeah, I'll give you... What do you think? I want to give you something good, right? Try to relate it as much as you can to your own feelings and your own intuitions and your own tastes. So when you're listening to music and when you're watching movies and when you're like, the things you think about that are emotionally stirring to you and are that's where you gotta like make the connections, right? Things that you find extremely beautiful, like try to make connections between your aesthetic of like your sense of what is beautiful and what stirs you and what you find really meaningful and what Hegel's trying to say, because that is what philosophy is about in general. Philosophy is about addressing that innermost aesthetic we have, right? think it's the best advice I can give.
And scientists, the sky's the limit. There are thousands of admitted projects in the U.S. that have happened, thousands in China, ones I've seen in like financial reports out of Costa Rica, South Korea, just everywhere. So,
and don't forget your thought, but I've seen a lot of like studies about like when the government would operate on like mentally retarded children.
oh, absolutely. You've had all the
yeah.
secret medical experiments and Tuskegee, but I mean, you were asking how far along it is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that 23 years ago or so, I saw a CBS News article about a military base in upstate New York that had spider goats on it. So I was my own producer then. So
Spider goats?
Spider goats.
Okay.
So I call the name of the guy on the thing. He answers. He goes, yeah, I'll come on your show. Yeah, I got a Defense Department contract. I'm a genetic engineer. We create body armor out of the milk of these goats that are, part spider. And all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. He got in a bunch of trouble for talking to me, but he'd been in CBS News. I have had people, after that happened, walk through
You
the
guys don't
street.
know what I'm doing? I'm like, every day I do like this wrist exercise where I like, and it sounds like I'm masturbating to neighbors because it's like, you hear it? It's like this rubbery sound of like really repetitive motion. It looks like I'm like fucking a fleshlight or something. Every time I like go travel and I use it, I'm scared like people next to me think like they hear it and they're like, I must be doing something sexual. And it's like this really rubbery sound. It's so weird, isn't it? I do 10. 10. Nine, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. See, in principle, I do 10 for each finger twice, but I always do more than 10 because I just like do as many as is what feels right. So fucking, god damn it. I really have gotten really bad at these. My wrists have gotten weak, man. I used to do these way better. It's not stress relief at all. It's to strengthen your grip and wrists. I've been doing this. I've had this for literally like 5 years. No, more than that. I've had this for like 8 years. I've been using this every day for 8 years. Okay.
You're a liar. We can't.
See, I'm gonna confess to you guys something. Naturally, my wrists are pretty weak naturally, but they're pretty good because I do that. It also lets me grip really high weights at the gym. Really high weights.
Can't splice goats and spiders. Well, since then, there's thousands of articles admitting spider goats. Anybody can type in spider goats. You'll get articles going back, 20 years. The point is that they kind of report it to see what we do and then kind of pull back. And so that's my point is if 20-something.
Oz, any advice on getting better at writing and putting thoughts into words?
Don't just shit your thoughts out with no filter. Have a filter. Think about what is the audience gonna think when I say this. So there's two forces at play when you write. One is the vital force of like speaking the truth with your fingers, right? That's what's gonna drive you. And then the other force is going to be your filter. Like, but say it in the right way. So you got to balance those two. You got to balance the thing where you're like getting your thoughts out there, and which is going to allow you to like, so the most of the energy you have to write is going to come from like this pure perverse uploading of your thoughts to your computer through your keyboard. But the hard part is editing and crafting and making sure. See what I do? My writing style is pretty much I will write a block, stop, and then I'll think really hard. I'll think really, really hard. How do I phrase this? And then I write. Fuck, I don't even know how I write. But I do them in bursts. So let me put it this way. There's one way you can write is just jack off and just splooge it all out, right? But what I do is I edge. I jack off a little bit, get to the edge, and then another writing block. Get to the edge, another writing block. Yeah, I'll get to the edge, another writing block. Don't splooge out all at once, right? Just do it block by block. That's how I do it.
Years ago, they had spiders, goats that were part spiders, whose udders were basically spider spinnerets, because the rest of the goat looks like a goat, but the udders are like a spider spinneret deal.
Holy fuck.
Look it up, guys. I'm not making this up. It's not even debatable. That's 20-something years ago. So,
Wow.
And I interviewed the head of the project. It's just insane. Like, I had the head of...
I gave all of that for a $5 dono. That's how generous I am. Generous. No, to be fair, I think that's worth $5. Come on. That's worth less than $5. That's worth like a nickel. That's some shit you do on the street. Yeah, here's a nickel. Being funny.
Harp on like 25 years ago, because back then I wasn't a big show, so I could just call and get people on. Like, oh yeah, come on, tell us about Harp. He's the top scientist. He comes on, there's an Air Force colonel on the line. In case anything's classified, they kill the interview in 20 minutes and cut the guy off. He's like, well, yeah, Harp can't ignite the atmosphere. We can't control the weather. And like, that's a real interview with the real head of Harp. That really happened. So much of what I've done has just been really open source.
Well, of all the shit that you talk about, I think that the animal-human hybrids are actually probably one of the more believable things that you talk about. I also like, people talk about how every generation has a new fight, and I feel like that's this generation too. Like, there's always a new threat to people's quality of life, people's freedom.
Blair, that's a great point. We think of the big threat as Hitler 80 years ago, or we think of it as Lenin or Stalin or Mao.
You never look at him.
Absolutely
What's your
not.
take on the Tito-Stalin split?
Stalin was right. Thank you for the 10. Sir. Good sir. But Stalin was correct.
Now.
Never look at now. And now
The only time Stalin was ever wrong was when Mao said so.
not tanks and airplanes. It's inflation, and it's lockdowns, and it's surveillance robots and drones, and it's replacing humans with AI. And that's the new threat. And people better wake
That's what
up.
Dugan says. That's what Dugan says.
They better start valuing human life again. And banding together is like a human union, not even for better pay or whatever at work, but a human union calling for dignity and taking care of each other and actually building a future. And that's what the globalists pose as liberals, is because that's what threatens them, is real liberalism, real renaissance, really coming together, really being loving, really building a real social safety net that means we don't let people be lazy, but we also help poor people and we empower people and we have healthy competition, not this divide and conquer thing we have now.
I'm pretty
All right, cool. Yo, guys, check this out. Yo, Jackson went to UCLA today. I gotta fucking see this. And they were defending. Oh my god. What the fuck? This guy was defending Bandera. What the fuck? Bro, I want to go to LA just to chill with Jackson and do this shit. I would have so much fun. I really want to go to LA to do this shit. Look at this dude. Why? He's got a Ukraine shirt. It's a Destiny viewer. It's an Adam something viewer. What is this? What are those? Yo. Jackson's so fucking funny. I want to see this video so bad. I want to see it so fucking. Who did did he upload it yet? He's probably gonna upload it tomorrow. Wow, did he stream today? No. Oh, he did earlier today. Earlier today with the Duran. That got a lot of views. Damn, they must have gotten pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. And how about them Swedes? What is this shit? CPUSA Liberal Caucus? What? There's a Liberal Caucus? Death to America. If you disagree with this account, you are a fascist. Now, what the hell is this? Bruh, what the fuck? What is this? Bro, what? Why? You find out a comrade you respected is one of those Patsock chauvinists. I'm liking this. I'm liking this. I'm following this. Comrade Harris. Oh my god. Glenn responded to the CPUSA. What the fuck? And they're back. Yo, that's so funny. Yo, I'm bringing this back. Yeah, I'm gonna get DFCA'd if I play the music, but I wanna. You guys remember this shit? What the fuck? What? Bruh. What the fuck? Are there really 11-year-olds on left Twitter? You're 11 years old and you're thinking about it? No. There's on left Twitter, you've got literal children. Where are the parents? Bro, where are the parents? Bro, what the fuck? Where are the parents? What? But I realize why these people are so vicious. They're just all unhappy. If you could listen to the music, it'd be so funny. I agree you have mental illness. I agree. All these people have mental illness. What? You rely on... Bruh. They just admit all of it. They just admit all of it. You know, they just admit everything. Thanks, Jenna. Yeah. And I just want you to know I found a reason for me to change who I used to be. A reason to start over new. And the reason is new. I found a reason to show, to change who I used to know. A reason to start over new. And my hair looks like it's made out of glue. I am just... Remember what I told y'all? Remember what I told y'all? Remember what I told y'all? Tomorrow, I will see you guys Saturday for the big debate. The big ass debate. I will see you Saturday with a big show. The big debate. The big, you know. The big event. Saturday on this channel. It's gonna happen. It's going down. It's gonna be real. Don't frown. Don't be a clown.
Wanna say goodbye. Goodbye to the people who hated on me. Goodbye to the people who loved me. Goodbye to the people who trusted me. Goodbye, goodbye to everybody. Goodbye to the people who hated on me. Goodbye to the people who loved me. me. Goodbye to the people who trusted me. Goodbye, goodbye to everybody. Now I need some changes in my life. Now I need to move on in life. Now it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye to everybody. Goodbye to the people who hate